Testing for Zoom. Testing for Zoom. Testing room mics for YouTube.
Welcome, everyone. The July 18th, 2023 regular council meeting is called to order at 4 o'clock. Council would like to acknowledge the Ucluelethat on whose traditional territories the District of Ucluelet operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Have all the council members received the 3 late agendas? Is that me?
Try it now.
Which, oh. Hello? Testing, oh, now I'm off.
I just took
Test. Nope. Okay.
When I turned mine on, it made that squelch. I think that was me with the feedback. It's 2 with the feedback. Now try yours.
Test, nope.
Try again. Try again.
Test.
I'll turn it up on the main.
Test.
I think mine might have been up too loud, George. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah, it felt like, oh, now I'm on.
Perfect.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Rotenberg. Now I'm a bit too loud.
You want to go down a little bit? No problem. One moment.
Test. That's better. Thanks. Okay, try this again. Have all the council members received the 3 late agendas, which include 6 emails or letters with additional public feedback on Development Variance Permit 2306 and 1 email with public feedback back on Development Permit 2308. May I have a motion to amend the July 18th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda by adding the late item on the first late agenda titled Variance Permit 2306, the late item on the second late agenda titled Additional Public Feedback on Variance Permit 2306, and the late item on the third late agenda titled Late Agenda 3, Further Public Input on Development Variance Permit 2306, to Appendix C of Report Item 7.2, Development Variance Permit Application 1701 Rainforest Lane.
So moved.
I'll second.
Councillor Anderson and Councillor Mafty, all in favor? And that carries. May I also have a motion to further amend the July 18th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda by adding late from the second late agenda titled 1333 Pine Road on-road parking concerns to item 7.1, Development Variance Permit for 1333 Pine Road as Appendix C.
So moved.
Councillor Kennington,
Seconded.
Councillor Anderson, all in favor? And that carries. May I have a motion to approve the July 18th, 2023 regular council meeting agenda as amended?
So moved.
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare, Councillor Mafty, all in favor? Carried. We have 2 sets of meeting minutes to review today. The first minutes are from the June 20th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting. Any errors or omissions? Councillor Hoare?
On page 3 of those minutes, that would be page 7 of the agenda. I just thought it probably should say Chris Martin's name instead of food bank representative. Everybody else is named and title, so.
Great. Any other errors or omissions? No? May I have a motion to adopt the June 20th, 2023 Committee of the Whole meeting as amended?
So moved.
Councillor Hoare,
Second.
Councillor Kennington, all in favor? Carried. The next item is the June 27th, 2023 regular council minutes. Any errors or omissions? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adopt the June 27th, 2023 regular council minutes as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Anderson,
Second.
Councillor Kennington, all in favor? And carried. Public input and delegations. Today we have a delegation from BC Hydro. Mr. Olenek, welcome. Please limit your presentation to 10 minutes or so and speak into the mic, please.
Great. Oops. Okay. Thank you very much, Mayor and Council, for allowing me the opportunity to come here and provide an update about BC Hydro on the West Coast, in particular for Ucluelet, and what we're doing across the province in some areas. Let's go to the next. Oh, sorry. Next one, please. So just to give an overview of us, we have 30 hydroelectric plants across the province. Of course, we have some on Vancouver Island. We have 80,000 K of transmission line, distribution line, and what's important to us on the island is a good portion of that is submarine cable coming over to Vancouver Island. And we have substations all over the province, and of course, the one at the Long Beach by the visitor center there is the Long Beach substation that feeds, or part of it that feeds Ucluelet and Tofino on the west coast. So next one there. Oops. So this just gives an idea of where we stand with regards to price. I know people will, maybe not happy when they get their electric bill, but just to put it in perspective, we have the third lowest rates in North America when it comes to electricity, and we're connected to the Western grid from British Columbia all the way on down to the States. It's there for a mutually beneficial agreement in case there's a natural disaster, in case there's problems. We're all connected to support one another. But as part of that, we have the cleanest electricity in all of West North America, and that's important as we try to develop a more green, energy efficient electrification culture within the province as we move away from fossil fuels even more intensely than we are doing right now. So there's an idea of our system, of course. Most of the power that we generate, of course, in the province is going to be from the Peace, the Revelstoke area where there's mica, and there's other facilities across the province, and it comes all the way from transmission lines from Fort St. John in that area, in Mackenzie, all the way down and crosses over. If we can go to the next, I'm just trying to keep it up to my 10 minutes here. Sorry, if we can go back, I'm sorry, but that was another slide. And it crosses over to Vancouver Island by two major submarine cable. But we get about 60%, 65% of our power from the mainland. So it all comes down from those long transmission lines all the way from the north part of the province down to the south coast. And we are adding, if you go to the next slide, please, we are adding Site C, which is on the Peace River. So essentially, we're just reusing the water that's already there, that was already created with the WAC Bennett Dam. So that'll provide us with about 1,100 more megawatts, and that'll be online very soon, and they're going to be starting to fill it actually in the next number of months. So it's just a reusing of the water that's already along the Peace River system to add to our reservoir, no pun intended, of green resources. The next slide, please. So on Vancouver Island, you'll see there's two transmission lines that come across. There's one we call it the 230 system that comes across from Tawasin. You'll see that big substation in Duncan. That's where that comes across to. That comes from Tawasin over to Duncan. And then the other one, which is the bulk of our system, the backbone for Vancouver Island, it comes across Texada Island and lands at Qualicum Bay, just above Qualicum Beach, Nile Creek there. That's the line that we had some trouble with, I guess 2-3 years ago with the heat dome, because the lines that are above the tide were exposed, well, not exposed, but were harmed because of the excessive heat. That they weren't really prepared for that 40+ degree heat, so that did impact us. And we do have facilities up and down the island, hydro facilities. We have Jordan River, we have Ash, which feeds and helps us when we're doing, I guess you'd call it, when time slows down over here, we rely on its islanded, the Ash River plant in Port Alberni. We have Comox, the Puntledge system there, and we have 3 facilities up in Campbell River. And that provides us about 40% of our power on Vancouver Island. So we're not totally dependent on the mainland, but we do rely on them for the majority of our power. The next one, please. And coming to the west coast, we have the transmission line, that Great Central Lake substation in Port Alberni, and then that transmits down to the Long Beach substation, and that's where you get your power over here. And like the north part of the island and other parts like Lake Cowichan as well, it's what we call a radial feed. It means it's only one line that feeds the community. So unfortunately, when that line goes down, everything goes down. In a distribution circuit, it could be fed from another area. So maybe one part of downtown might go on, but we can feed it from another area. Unfortunately, when it comes for this transmission, this is only the one way in, and you realize that, of course, with the road right now it's very limited in what we can do when that line goes down. And that can be quite challenging, of course, when we have storms or anything like that. If the lines are down and there's problems past Ash River, then we can rely on that like we do with the islanding, so we can island it and provide power to the west coast. But if there's a fault in the line between here and Ash, then unfortunately the whole power goes out to the west coast. The next slide, please. So you see this is growth for the Ucluelet area. Of course, 20 and 21 and part of 22 was COVID. You can really see the numbers in megawatts go down, and now it's coming back up. And you can see it's pretty constant in wintertime. That's because we're a winter peaking region, meaning our maximum use is going to be during the winter periods. High electric use, a lot of electric baseboard heat, lights are on, heat's on, TV's on. We have to make sure we can meet the power for the coldest day of the year, the instantaneous time of high capacity. We're moving up in summer, but generally, it's just a question of opening the doors, not needing to turn on air conditioners. But of course, there's a lot of pressure in the lower mainland with condo development and urbanization there, much more than in other areas where there's an extreme heat. You're seeing a lot greater usage of air conditioners, and of course, that's going to increase the load on our system. Ucluelet's in a good place. We have to put a new line out to Tofino for the water treatment facility out there and growth out there. There is the residential housing project out here that's impacting load, and of course electric vehicles, but you're not in the same position. Tofino's not watching. You're not in the same position as Tofino with regards to capacity on the line. Next slide, please. So these are some upgrades we've done to this system. We upgraded the transformer, the substations in the Long Beach substation, and also at the Great Central to accommodate for growth over the next 10 to 15 years. We upgraded the lines, and we added when fiber optics were added, so we had to upgrade the lines as well to accommodate the new fiber optics that were put in. And two things. One is the Kennedy Hill, of course, work that was redone. Great change to the highway, but we had to make a lot of system improvements onto the lines out there with regards to the transmission towers coming out there. And of course, we added the Long Beach field office, which was a major improvement, and that's on Port Albion Road that we added out there. We can go to the next slide, please. We can skip this one and the next one, just interest of time. Okay, that's why I'm doing it. So that's the distribution system in Ucluelet, of course. We're pretty good on how things are with regards to vegetation and planning and all of that. Of course, that's going downtown and out to down Port Albion Road there, providing power out there. We can go to the next slide there. So the vegetation work, how we deal with outages and impact that we've had. We have a vegetation work every 4 years in communities. Of course, you see things where it's changing. We have to go into communities sometimes and do a lot sooner because of growth, because of potential contact with our lines. But it's generally a 4-year cycle that we have. And this Ucluelet line is ready. It's been inventoried. I think they've talked to those parties that need to be talked to along the line. So that should go in the next 6 months of some time. They're going to time it because they still have to do some distribution clearing vegetation work through the park that they're working through. So if we have the clearing crews out here, they're going to continue with that work here. And of course, trying to do hazard tree removal and clearing up the lines on the transmission line. That's an ongoing work, and not always going to get everything, but they patrol it quite regularly to try and make sure that they've removed any hazard or potential hazard with hazard trees. But unfortunately, living on the west coast, I say that for all of Vancouver and all of BC, really, we're going to get these storms coming, and we can do as much as we want, but unfortunately, unless you go back 200 feet, you're still going to get very healthy trees that come down, unfortunately, on top of our lines. Next slide, please. So yeah, the Long Beach District Office, that was really important for us and certainly for the community. It was at the substation before. We moved it over to the to a property on Port Albion Road. And it was important we were there. We had to make sure it was in a tsunami safe zone. We're a post-disaster structure. We want to be there in case something happens. So we want to make sure it was in the right spot. Basically to be there in case there's any problem. It's a lot bigger facility. It's going to accommodate growth. We know there's going to be growth in the West Coast, so it allows us to have bigger trucks come out here and keep them here, a larger yard to store stuff, poles when we're doing work so things aren't delayed, so we have the equipment, we have the supplies that we need. And also it's a much larger office to have in case there's any emergency. We can have staff out here and be here if the need arises. Next slide, please. So this is some outages, some causes. Of course, there was a big one. The last major one was an MVA with that. I think it was a grader that came off the flatbed that took it down. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, when there's an outage on the line, it's going to impact it. We can't feed it. There's outages in transmission line that impact, say, Ladysmith, and we can feed it from another area. Unfortunately, we don't have that luxury here. We had planned outages, as you know, very well aware. Thank you for your cooperation all the time with that. Sometimes we just don't know what happens. And we just have it, and they patrol it. And of course, lightning and trees. Next slide, please. So that tells a story right there for our distribution circuits. I mean, we do a lot of vegetation work across the province, across Vancouver Island, but we're never going to eliminate outages completely. Pretty aggressive with tree trimming when we can be. Prior to the big storm in 2006, people would be very protective of their trees and vegetation in their communities. But if you recall the big storm in 2006 that hit the South Coast, things changed after that, and people were like, hey, there's a tree, I think it's leaning and it may fall in a couple of years. We want it out now. As an example, we go around with blue dots and we paint the trees, so we paint the trees with a blue dot to remove it. We've had instances on some Gulf Islands where we have to go back and do the work because we find people are actually spray painting blue paint on trees that we didn't think needed to come out. They wanted them to come out. So, and maybe they're doing it on their own property to get a little bit of extra clearing. So it just tells you how things have changed on Vancouver Island. And it helps us. It's good. There are, of course, some challenges. You want to protect the tree integrity, the greening of a community, but it's something we try and work through with communities. Next slide, please. Of course, when we have storms, how we respond, first and foremost, we try to deal with the transmission line, making sure we can repair that. That's often the cause. I mean, we do have vegetation issues here on the West Coast, of course, but the trees here generally are adapted and strong to pay attention to the prevailing winds that come off when storms come. The problem they face on the east coast of the island is the winds change and the trees are strengthened for a certain wind direction, and when they come in from another direction, it's a lot easier for them to fail, and they fail quite substantially in some areas. In the last storm, 2018, it was a disaster over many of the Gulf Islands, and they went like I think 3 weeks without power over the Christmas time. So the challenge for us, though, while we know it's a transmission outage, we don't know where on the line it could be, so we have to patrol it. And of course, the weather's bad, so we can't patrol it because the weather's not cooperating with us to put a helicopter in the air. And of course, we'll work and try and bring on as many customers as we can at one time. Everybody wants to power up as soon as possible, but it's like clearing a road. You're not going to start with the highway or cul-de-sac first. You're going to start with the highway and work your way down. Next slide, please. So it's my final slide. Unfortunately, this is the scariest slide of the lot. They're called subtropical cyclones, and I forget the number I had. I don't have it in my notes here, but we used to have, I'll say the number, 8 between 1880 to 1962. And they could come up. I know there was a storm that they talked about that, you know, at the just almost at the last minute, it veered off. It was supposed to hit Vancouver Island and just hit Seattle and the west coast of Washington and Oregon. It just devastated them. So it can change, but that's hit us. We've had about 8 from in the whole Pacific Northwest from 1880 to 1962. That number's doubled from 1962 to 2018. Of course, that's a result of climate change. It's something we have to adapt for. I mean, 1962 was Hurricane Frida, severely damaged Vancouver. 2006 was the real watershed change moment for us. We've changed our focus on how we deal with outages, and it wasn't sort of the status quo. We had to change things and realize we're never going to eliminate outages completely. What we hope to do is lessen the impact on our customers by lessening the frequency, the duration, or making sure customers have better information what they can do in case there is an outage. You know, in Vancouver, it may mean going to Burnaby for a meal, but of course, in other communities, you want to make sure. We don't want to, you know, we're not in sales where we're going to under-promise and over-deliver. That doesn't work if you're the co-op grocery store. They want to know exactly when power is going to get on. Do they need a reefer truck to come in and make sure so they don't have anything that's going to spoil? So you want to make sure everybody has the right information. 2015, that was just a summer freak storm that hit the Lower Mainland. So it can happen any time. It doesn't happen just in winter. I'm always reminding people, be prepared. You never know, especially living on, I'm going to say it here, I mean, we never know what's going to happen. It's not just storm events, it's natural disasters, making sure we're always prepared for it. And of course, 2018, I don't think it hit the West Coast so bad, but again, a watershed storm event that hit South Coast, and just a reminder to improve our efforts of hardening the system. Just as an aside, we have these things called reclosers on our lines where you may see a line, the lights trip or something when it looks, do you think the power, did it go out, did it not go out? Well, that's just a recloser. It's kind of like when your line goes off at home, when you trip out your circuit, you have to go downstairs and flip the circuit to bring it back on because you've overloaded it. For us, we have these reclosers. What they do is just, they trip the circuit up momentarily, determine if it's clear, then they bring it back on. If it's fine, then we bring it back on. In many locations, what we're doing now with this dry heat, we've taken those off because we don't want it to trip back out. If something's hit the line, we want it to fail right away. So you may see an outage that may last a little bit longer than normal. That's because we don't want the line to just be re-energized. It could be a branch on there. Of course, we don't want to start a devastating forest fire. So hopefully that was 10 minutes less. Happy to take any questions. That's the last slide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Olenek?
Yeah, I just have one very quick question out of curiosity. Yeah, that new facility that you mentioned that said it could accommodate a larger crew. Is that like sleeping space as well if a crew comes out here and they have to work for a few days, or is it just like office space?
Well,
or?
I mean, technically they could if they wanted to sleep on the floor. They brought a cot.
Okay.
But and depending on the emergency. But I mean, that's why. Technically, but there's no beds or anything put in there. I mean, they want to go where they can have a hot shower, anything like that. I mean,
understandable.
We're working 16 hours, and we've had issues. That's a challenge for us when we go in areas like on the Gulf Islands. Crews had to leave. People are saying, "Why can't you just stay here?" Well, no, they want to go home. They want to go back to a place. They've worked 16 hours. They want a hot meal, want a hot shower, and they're going to go back out it again. And so.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Well, thank you for taking the time to come here and do this presentation for us. We really appreciate it.
Thanks.
Before we get into the rest of the agenda, Chief Geddes, I think you have a special guest you'd like to introduce to us.
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor. Yeah, it's my honor here to introduce my new full-time Deputy Fire Chief, Marcus McCurry. Marcus has a great history of customer service in the area. He's been in the hotel industry for quite some time out here. He's got a family and a home in Ucluelet, and went through an extensive hiring process and found what we were looking for right in our own building, which is great. So, so very honored to introduce Deputy Chief Marcus McCurry. And he'll come up and say a couple of things about himself.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you, Mayor and Council. As he mentioned, my name is Marcus McCurry. I'm the new Deputy Fire Chief here in Ucluelet. all I can say is I'm super grateful, and I feel really honored to serve this community further, to serve my fire department and to serve the district. A little bit about me: I've been on the fire department for about 6 years. I rose through the ranks as a lieutenant, then to a captain, and now to my new role. And yeah, I'm really excited to start focusing a little bit more on recruitment and training, and actually retention as well as our senior members. That can be one thing that, as transient communities struggle with, is retention of that senior team. But other than that, yeah, me and my wife have been out here for about 11, 12 years, back and forth between Tofino and Ucluelet. And yeah, I'm just really honored and grateful, and I'm going to give it my all to serve you guys properly. Thank you.
Thank you. How many active members do you currently have on the crew?
So about 2 years ago, it was 1 year, and I think just due to life, just due to people moving away, we lost about 7 to 8 members. We've since done 2 recruitment drives, but we're currently sitting at 17 members, which it's good because the people that are there are very committed, but you know, people are allowed to go on vacation, they're allowed to have lives because it is a volunteer department. So we would like to do another actually, we are going to be doing a recruitment drive this fall, as well as an open house during Fire Prevention Week. I'll be working with Sam at the district to kind of get that out there, get the word out. But we'll probably be looking for another 5-6 members this fall. Yeah.
Great. Thanks for the update.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay, we have one piece of unfinished business this evening. The report titled Environmental Development Permit, Development Variance Permit for 1656 Bay Street is on the agenda as unfinished business because I am invoking my authority under Section 131(1) of the Community Charter to require Council to reconsider and vote again on the decision Council made on June 27th to defeat the following motion: that Council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue Development Variance Permit DVP 23-10 to allow the construction of an addition to a single-family dwelling 16 meters from the natural boundary of a watercourse. Since I have invoked my power to require reconsideration of Council's decision to defeat this motion, it is now on the table for discussion and then a vote. And just to be clear, the reason I brought this item back, there are 3 reasons, actually. There were only 4 of us at the last council meeting, which isn't unusual, but the vote was a tie, which is a little unusual. And a tie vote apparently defeats the motion. That was the first time I learned that. The second reason is that the Qualified Environmental Professional, or QEP, report definitely states that the proposed project, as currently projected, is not expected to have any adverse effects to wildlife or wildlife habitat. That was in our report last meeting. And thirdly, the zoning for this property does allow for short-term rental suites. So just because someone doesn't like short-term rentals is not a reason to defeat the motion. So I'll open that up for further discussion. Anyone? Councillor Kennington?
I guess I'll start. I saw they've amended their proposal. Are we considering the amended proposal of long-term rental versus short-term rental, or is this the original proposal back on the table for short-term rental?
I think it's up to the proponent to do one or the other. I don't think we need to know what that decision is. Is that right, Mr. Rotenberg?
I'm just going to refer this to the Director of Community Planning.
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, as I understand it, this is really a reconsideration of the question on the variance, which really was not about the use. That the variance is about the setbacks and siting, and it, under the laws of BC, actually use is not something that can be varied. It's done by a zoning amendment. So really this is about the sort of physical use of the site as opposed to the uses. Now the letter offers and suggests a change in the use, but really it's about the building and where it would be constructed. Hope that helps.
Okay.
And the development variance is requesting, as it is in line with the QEP report, to vary it from 30 meters to 16 meters on the subject property. Is that correct?
So through the mayor, on page 25 of the agenda is a copy of the draft development variance permit, the DVP 2310. And so under section 4, it does list basically the variance would be construction of the addition to a single family dwelling 16 meters from the natural boundary of a water course, whereas the section 3062B of the zoning bylaw would require 30 meters.
So that is the variance that we're looking for.
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Hoare, you went out to the property, I believe?
Yeah, I went out to take a look at the actual water course. Just because I was curious what was going on over there. It's pretty heavily vegetated. I know that I'm concerned there's quite the sewer smell there, so something is getting into that water course, because we could smell it on the other side of the road and in the, like, when we were in the parking lot in the park at Edna Bachelor, which is not good. So I know that I pointed that out to staff, and they were looking into what was going on there, because there shouldn't be untreated sewage in any of the water courses. And
exactly. And I believe Public Works is looking into that. Correct, Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, correct.
Further discussion? Councillor Mafty? Councillor Kennington?
I'm looking at the figure 2 subject property on Schedule E, which shows the 30-meter setback from those water courses, and I see that there's basically 4 lots that are unbuildable. So in these cases, we're referring to a QEP to make a decision whether or not this is going to have an impact. So in this case, the QEP has said no. So I always like to refer to the professionals in any situation, and in this case, so I would be supportive of that.
Thank you. Councillor Mafty?
I just wanted to chime in because I was one of the votes that defeated the proposal, and I do agree that the intended use wasn't the issue brought up for debate, but I did correspond with the proponent, and I went back and forth. And speaking for myself personally, I do think that the intended use that justifies the request for variance is something that council should take into consideration, because if somebody comes before us and they ask us for a variance, you know, the very first question that we're going to ask ourselves is, okay, well, why? The rules are there. If you want them changed, explain why and convince us why. And so I agree that I don't think it's fair to say, well, you know, I don't like short-term rentals, or, you know, I don't like the idea of a 3-car garage. But I do think it's something that bears noting, and in that regard, I want to commend the proponent for the letter that they sent and for revisiting their approach. And I think that certainly for myself, it really does change the calculus of, okay, if you're asking for a change of rules for, you know, something that sits a lot better in terms of how it might benefit the community, how it might affect the community in a positive way, it's a lot easier for me to sort of justify the variance versus, you know, someone who comes up and says, well, you've done this before, and technically you could do it, and it's not necessarily beneficial to anyone. And I don't know, I don't think it's a crazy notion that the intention behind the variance is something that should play into the decision, at least for me.
Councillor Anderson, any thoughts?
I had a chance to read through it, and like Councillor Kennington was saying, looking at the QEP, it made sense to me, and I agree that, like, the riparian zone is important. In that particular spot, it looked like they'd done a lot of work to make sure that water course is being exited out to the rock, and it did make sense to me. I also did read the email from, I think, James, or I think maybe it was from Bruce, regarding the smell, and there could be a bit of contamination. And there's a derelict or a not in use lift station, I think, right there as well on the other side. But yeah, it doesn't necessarily bother me in this case. I think it makes sense. And again, that letter that the recent letter from the proponent made a lot of sense as well, and it sounded like they were reconsidering as well what their final use would be, which, speaking to a benefit to the town, there's definitely something there as well.
Through the mayor to Bruce, I guess. As you stated, though, that's not part of the consideration. So when we're deliberating here, it's not whether or not it's going to be a short-term rental. So I don't want anybody to think that's on the table if it's not on the table.
Correct, it's not on the table.
Okay.
Yeah, this is just an environmental variance, basically.
Well, it's two things. It's the environmental
Well, yeah.
development permit and then the development variance
Variance.
permit. Two things.
Yeah, I've certainly read that QEP pretty closely, and I get that they say that there isn't an issue. I have a really hard time with construction in riparian zones, even, not the most pristine riparian zones. You'd be amazed what lives in some not pristine environments. I've seen some pretty skanky things over the years. Back in my former life as a biologist, I've seen a lot of things in places where you wouldn't expect to see them. So that's one of the reasons why I was voting against it, because I feel really strongly about that protection factor. And I think I would have an easier time with it if it was like from 30 meters to 25 in both spots, but it's like actually having that amount is just, it worries me, erosion of the edge into the stream, so I struggle with it, even though I know the QEP is saying that there's nothing to worry about. I still have a little bit of an issue with it.
I think we do have to trust the experts. And the QEP is saying that it is not expected to have any adverse effects to wildlife or wildlife habitat. So that's their professional opinion. Any other discussion? So we'll call the vote. And
Do we need to make a motion?
the motion is that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue Development Variance Permit DVP 23-10 to allow the construction of an addition to a single-family dwelling 16 meters from the natural boundary of a watercourse. Start with that one. All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. And that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue Environmental Development Permit DP 23-03 to allow an addition in an environmental development permit area at 1656 Bay Street. All in favor? Any opposed? And that carries. Thank you. Is the proponent in the audience? Oh, it's okay. Great. There were just a couple of unfamiliar faces, so I wasn't sure who was who. Okay. You don't have to stay for the rest of the meeting if you don't want to.
Run away.
Okay, we have 7 report items this evening, and public input will be received on these items. The first report is 7.1, Development Variance Permit for 1333 Pine Road. After staff present, there will be an opportunity for the applicant and then members of the public to address council on the proposed permit. Ms. Whitney Brown, welcome.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As the Mayor mentioned, this is a matter at 1333 Pine Road. This topic is one Council will be familiar with for this particular property. It's located on Pine Road there on the map you can see on the screen. Next slide, please. This matter first came before Council at their regular meeting on June 27th. And as described in that report, which is, I believe, also in the agenda, the applicant submitted a building permit to convert their garage into a bed and breakfast suite prior to the adoption of Bylaw 1310 in the fall of 2022, which, among other things, restricted driveway widths to 7 meters in residential zones. And that width is not adequate enough to locate the 3 required parking spots for the single-family dwelling plus the B&B. And because at that time they did not submit a parking plan when the bylaw changed, there's no legal non-conforming status associated with the parking, and they require variance. So the originally staff recommended a variance to widen the driveway width and locate the required parking on site. The site, as you can see in the image there, has some lovely mature laurel trees along the frontage, and some of those would need to be removed in order to site 3 cars. So the applicant's initial or preference is to retain the existing landscaping on site, and they included as part of their application a survey with some neighbor support to that end. So at the regular meeting previously, Council directed staff to give notice for a revised variance to waive the parking associated with the B&B suite, and we have now done that. So this matter has returned to Council now for further consideration and discussion. So happy, of course, to answer any questions relating to this, and the applicant is also present, and as well as the public should be given a chance to speak.
Great, thank you. Any questions from Council to Ms. Whitney Brown?
Through the mayor, why weren't they required to have a parking plan in place? Because every application I've ever submitted has had to have a parking plan. So why was it missed in this case?
So part of what occurred at this point is that the parking is becomes a matter for bed and breakfasts at business license. If you build the suite technically, but don't actually use it, you never actually need that parking spot. Where we require it is at business license stage. At the time that the applicant applied for their building permit, the bylaw had not yet been introduced, which was Bylaw 1310 as amended to include the parking change hadn't been introduced, so staff didn't flag that they should include their parking on site. Now we require it because the changed bylaw restricts the size of it, but they got caught right in sort of the interval, about a month, 6-week interval between when the initial bylaw was introduced and then when it was amended and returned for 3rd and 4th reading. So that's why it's a little bit of an unusual situation.
Any further questions from Council? No? Okay, thank you. And does the applicant wish to speak? Oh,
Click the raise your hand icon or *9 if you'd like to speak, applicant. All right, the applicant has been unmuted.
Hi there, this is Andy Wardrop speaking, and I just wanted to again just say that our primary commitment is to house visitors that are in need instead of nightly rentals. Just wanted to make that clear. We're reviewing a program participant for Ocean Wise right now for a placement at the aquarium. So we just wanted to say that while we are hoping to have the parking amended so that it could be used potentially for Airbnb, that it isn't our primary intention.
Great, thank you for that information. And thank you for surveying the neighbors to sign the petition. That that helps us a lot.
Yeah, of course. We know it is a very street that's very family friendly. We're close with our neighbors, and definitely our intention to, not cause any disruption.
Thanks. Does council have any questions for the applicant? No? Okay, now is the opportunity for members of the public to speak to the proposed permit. Are there any members of the public that are attending in person that would like to speak? Yes, please go to the mic. And just state your name and address, please.
Hi, my name is Simon. I live at 1333 Pine Road as well. As Andy was saying, our goal is really to accommodate people in town and not really Airbnb. Just another thing I would like to add as well is the guest parking would be situated or located in our driveway, not on the street for the amendment. We only have one small car. I have a truck. We're currently getting rid of it, so basically it's only going to be one small car and the Airbnb or suite parking in our driveway. So the amendment basically that we're asking is only on paper. The third parking will basically never be used really. And also, we take care of our front yard, and our laurels are beautiful, and we're trimming them, and if need be, we can trim them a bit further to accommodate a bit more room for parking as well. So
I did drive by last month to look at the property when this came up the first time, and you have some beautiful trees there.
thank you. That's it.
What's your last name, Simon?
Lalonde, Lalande.
Does council have any questions for Simon? No? Okay. Oh, Councillor Anderson?
I think your first choice is obviously street parking, and then the second choice,
Well, so we've been told when we did the application that the street parking would be a difficult variance to ask for, so we opted for enlarging our current current driveway. But then when we came to council last time, you guys said that it would be a shame to get rid of those laurels, so that's why we're kind of going that route now.
right. Or I'm not a horticulture guy. Are laurels replantable if they were moved?
Not at that size, unfortunately. They're super mature and beautiful trees, so it would be quite the task to replant them. I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it's quite the task. Yeah.
Right. Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Rich, go to the mic, please.
Richard Kelsevich, 1308 Pine Road. I wrote a letter to council today in regards to the parking issue at the house. Since I received the variance, every day I come home and there's cars double parked in front of the laurels, that there's not even enough room to pull over off-road. In Whitney's picture, the laurels will be parallel to the parking lot, so not even street side. So I don't see how that's going to affect us. I've done some work at your place. I think if there was intent for long-term residents, maybe there would be kitchenette or something. But no, I think from my understanding, it's going to be a B&B, and that's what I've heard. And I don't think Pine Road's changed drastically. I've bought my house there 14 years ago. I lived there previously before I bought my house. And it's a beautiful, nice, family-oriented street. I would hate to. We deal with enough tourism outside of our homes. I don't want to have to deal with tourism right up to my last step on my streets, with people coming and going. Nobody owns any particular parking spot on the road, so I don't know where they might end up parking, with the laurels that are roadside. A passenger door can't even open, right? So if you have more than two people, they're gonna have to pull out on the road to open a car door. Our road's littered with all sorts of stuff, bad parking, there's no signage, there's no setbacks on specifically where to park. So I don't think it's a good idea to have this roadside parking. And if you do go forward with it, I'd like to see some initiative from council to specify, clean up the roadway, make sure there's no garbage there, people are parked parallel, and that everyone's in the same order so everyone understands what to do. But there's no order as of today. So by issuing this permit, you're just encouraging more disaster that's already there. So I think it's really up to the onus of the property owners if they want to expand stuff on their property to be responsible for the expansion and not put the demand onto public. And it's not a matter of lay of the land or rocks or this. You have lots of property there, so if you gotta sacrifice a couple bushes, you know, we sacrifice time, money, you've had to move hydrometers, you've lost your garage. So honestly, I don't see why a couple bushes at this point is an issue. And it will impact me having this traffic parked on the road, but the Laurels won't impact me. I won't miss those one iota. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Your letter to us actually identified a number of issues on Pine Road, not just this one, so it might be something that staff could look into. Mr. Gregg?
Sorry, I have talked to Mayor and another councillor previously outside of the room, so I've issued complaints to bylaw over the years on parking and all sorts of stuff, so this isn't new. Thank you.
Mr. Gregg? Is that something staff could look into?
Through the mayor, certainly it may be a combination of bylaw enforcement and also just physically what is the infrastructure there. That a lot of the parking, I think, on Pine Road actually happens on the boulevard. It's not on the street, but it's off on the shoulder, and so there are various approaches between both what's the infrastructure and then what is the enforcement of regulations. So it may be either, and that could come back to council as something that is in, you know, either budget requests if it's making physical changes or more if it's something that we can do just on bylaw enforcement. That's something we can look at as well.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Councillor Kennington.
For Bruce, through the mayor. We have a situation on Bay Street where somebody's been sort of issued a warning about the illegality of parking on the boulevard. Is that in the bylaw that all boulevards are not allowed to be parked on?
Through the mayor, I think that may be a different situation where it's a matter of parking on what is actually a pedestrian pathway that's in the boulevard. I mean, if the boulevard is all the area between the road edge and the property line, sometimes there's a sidewalk or a pedestrian walkway. You're not supposed to park on those. Sometimes there isn't. It's on Pine Road. There's no defined pedestrian pathway. So there's, I'm getting ahead of myself. I wouldn't want to start recommending what's the solution for Pine Road.
No.
I mean, it may be just fine as it is, or it may need some adjustments, whether that's, again, physical or letting people know what the safe way to park is, and whether that's a matter of education or enforcement. That's
So
something we could look at.
there's no bylaw against what's currently happening there, people parking on the side of the road.
On Pine Road, we have diagonal parking, which states there's not allowed diagonal parking there, and I've written a bylaw about it. And yet people still park diagonally and overhang onto the roadway. And I found the bylaw stating you're not allowed to park diagonally there.
So just parallel.
Just parallel.
Okay.
But if it's a boulevard and not on-road parking, again, this might be a gray area.
Okay, we'll move on. Anyone else attending in person that would like to speak? Yes? Yes, please. Back up to the mic.
Simon again, 133 Pine Road. I mean, I appreciate your concern, and we're super happy to listen to them. One thing I want to say is, like I said, the parking that we're applying for will be empty most of the time, and also I think we're kind of getting away from our variance at 1333 Pine Road. Seems like there's a bigger issue on Pine, which is not what we're trying to solve right now. I think that would be a different discussion or situation. Those laurels are precious to us, and it's our house, and we're not talking about garbage on other people's property. So I think just let's try to focus on our variance and on Pine Road, and then if there's other problems, we can discuss about that later.
Thank you. I realize that. I was just bringing it up for staff to be aware of. Anyone else in person that wishes to speak? Are there any members of the public attending by Zoom that wish to speak? Please click the raise your hand icon or press *9 if you're attending by phone.
There are no hands raised at this time.
And have we received any unpublished correspondence on this matter to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
No.
Is there any further public input? There is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
Can I ask a question of the proponent before that?
Of the proponent or of staff?
Of the proponent.
Okay. Simon, can you go back up to the mic, please?
Or Andy, I guess, is there, but I presume you can. Okay, but you speak for her?
Yeah, if I can answer, I'll let her speak.
Yeah, I'm trying to wrap my head around all this, and frankly, this is kind of an interesting one. If you're not given the variance, would you cut down the laurels?
We will have to, because we're trying here to establish a suite. I mean, if we talk about other problems on Pine Street, illegal suite is a really big one as well. We're trying to do it by the book in front of the council, applying for permits, and we want to have the possibility to, if we're in need, we can have the Airbnb, which is not our first thing that we want to do, but we want to be by the book legal to run this suite. So yeah, unfortunately, if we go that route, those laurels will probably come down. Yeah.
Okay, so you're here to try to save the laurels. It's not an either or for you.
No, not really.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, it's to save the beauty of the street. I know some people don't care, but for us, it really makes a big difference on the street with the greenery and also for privacy for us.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. Okay. Thank you.
No worries.
And they did get 12 signatures on their survey from neighbors. Okay, would council like to make a motion?
You've got the other proponent, online right now with her hand up. Would you like me to unmute her?
Oh, she has her hand up? Okay, sure.
Okay, Andy, we're going to unmute you. Andy, you're unmuted.
Hi there. Sorry, I was just going to add quickly that the difference in the parking requirement, if it wasn't used as a Airbnb rental, the intended parking would still be the same. Just wanted to bring that to the forefront because if it was used for guests, they would still be parking there. So the intended use and the use, whether it was a B&B suite or there was someone staying in there, and it wasn't for B&B use, there still would be one additional car. And it would be one car for myself living in the house in the driveway, and then one car for the person staying in the suite. So we would still not be using the street parking.
Thank you. Any questions for Andy? Okay, thanks, Andy. Any other hands raised, Mr. Rotenberg?
Not at this time.
Thank you. So there is a staff recommendation for the third time. Would council like to make a motion? Anyone?
I'll move that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue development variance permit DVP 23-08 to waive parking requirements for one B&B room at 1333 Pine Road.
Thank you, Councillor Mafty. Seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, this one is a tough one for going back. There's some complexity to it in the fact that there was a turnover of bylaw, and this person sort of got stuck in the middle of a change. And not only that, there was also a turnover of council. So we kind of have this decision now. Like, we weren't part of the decision before, or some of us with the move to the road from widening the driveway itself. But yeah, I spoke to a couple of people just randomly. I went down and looked at it. The laurels are lovely, by the way. I think they look great. I'm not going to argue with that. But I did talk to a couple of people that had a concern that, and maybe this is something we need to talk about later, but I guess people were concerned that with the speed bumps that were on Peninsula, people were using Pine as an alternate and getting some speed through there. And with all the parallel parking on the side, there were sort of kids kind of weaving in and out of there. And that's the part that scared me. So when, I appreciate that, you're trying to do things by the book. You're bringing it up, and the B&B thing doesn't. I'm not even talking about that. I just think when we offer parallel parking and an exemption in that situation, or waiving the parking in that situation on a street that's already pretty busy, and a couple of people I talked to were scared about that situation. To me, that's a bit of a red flag. And if more people start parking in that way on that street, will it get even more hectic for the kids that are walking up and down there? So that's just what's going through my mind in that case.
And I think we can do a subsequent motion about Pine Street in particular, but we'll just deal with this one at the moment.
I have a couple of points to add to what Councillor Anderson is saying. I'm curious, where are all these cars coming from? Because each house is supposed to have 2 parking spots off street. So it seems to me that it's not just one person that's asking for a little something. It's everybody who lives there, unless they all have 4 cars. So
illegal streets. We're trying to do it by the book, and we're trying to be honest about it, but it's not everybody that's acting that way.
Yeah, I understand that, and that's why that needs to be in a separate motion.
And I'd also like to add, as far as safety is concerned, cars backing out onto a street are probably more of a hazard than a parallel parked car. So, this is, a lot of the concerns seem to be about the safety of people walking around, and neither situation has a huge advantage over the other as far as safety. Whether you back over someone or take them out from the side, it's dangerous. So, we do need to address overall the parking issue on all the roads in town, because we have people parking their boats on the street, and we've had RVs parked on our street with extension cords crossing sidewalks, and we just need to look at everything overall. So that's my only comment on that.
Good point. Any further discussion?
If I could just chime in, I want to first just direct a comment to Mr. Kalsovich. I always tell people, speak up, let your voice be heard, and whether we like it or not, we'll have to consider. I want to commend you for reaching out. I looked at your photos, I read your letter. I'm familiar with Pine Road. I see the concern. I don't disagree with you, and I think you've brought some really valid points. To speak to the proponent, I appreciate that you're kind of getting caught in the middle here. It's not clear to me that you're the problem, but I understand that there's a perception that you're part of the problem, and I appreciate that you guys are trying to approach it in a way where, as you said, you're doing it by the book. This one's really funny because it's like really the epitome of like a small town issue, but that doesn't make it any less important. And I think because of that, we should really consider it quite carefully, because it does affect everyone. And all I'd say is that I don't, in this case, I don't think it's fair to hold the proponent to an unrealistic standard that's based on the behavior of other people on the street. It's not just the two of you on that street. And I think that a lot of the problem that Mr. Kalsovich is pointing out to us, it's unfair to attribute that to just one person. And so I would say to Mr. Kalsovich, I hear you. You're not wrong, and I think it behooves us to try and deal with some of these issues. And I'd say to the proponent, it's clear what the issues are, that you have to make sure that you're on the right side of them if you are granted this. That's just to sort of preface my vote on this.
Councillor Anderson?
One more thing through the mayor. I totally agree, and I'm I see both sides for sure, and I feel for the proponent. But I'm always really careful about these precedents that we're setting, especially in a high density situation like that, where we've got a lot of smaller lots close together, and if there is a lot of illegal suites or what have you, if those were to come online as being legal, and they did satisfy the permit, save the parking, then you're kind of in a situation where you kind of have to let them do the same thing. And at what point does that road become a parking lot? Do you know what I mean? Where you just get so many people coming down there. And I don't know, that's my 2 cents on that. I'm just trying to think about the precedent in the long term.
Well, variances do come before us individually, so it's our decision whether we grant them or not.
True.
I think in this case, I have to take it at face value, the feedback from the proponent about, one small vehicle and then another vehicle, and it doesn't, to take their claim at face value, it doesn't sound like we're going to see a situation where they're going to be, like 4 work trucks and just, it's not, I could be totally wrong, in which case I'm going to feel horrible if this comes back before us and Mr. Kalsovich is like, I told you, and sends us a bunch of photos. But I think we have to give people the benefit of the doubt and sort of like presume innocence until guilt is proven. But yeah, I agree. And there was another case that came before us a few months ago where I know we hemmed and hawed, and that for me, that was the big issue. Is like, okay, so we give it to you, and then it becomes, with each subsequent person that just asks for the same thing, it gets harder and harder to say no, and then it turns into playing favorites, or like, well, why'd you say yes to those 10 people and no to me? But I think, I hear your point, but in this case right now, I also see the issue of the laurels. Like, on the one hand, I'm like, look, man, just cut down the trees. It's easy. On the other hand, it's like, well, is that what we're coming to? Like, it's an asset. I can't ignore Mr. Kalsovich, but I also can't ignore the 10 people that are like, yeah, you know what, we kind of like those laurels, and this is no skin off our back. And I don't know.
You need to drive by the property.
I have.
Any further discussion? We have
I'll just parking. Sorry. And no, I agree with that, and I think that's right. The one thing that, looking over this situation, it kind of reminded me of, sometimes there'll be an addendum or an appendix letter that comes with something that's really not part of the motion necessarily, and I'm not picking on the proponent here, but where they'll say, hey, we're not even going to use this anyway. We only have one car. We're getting rid of the other. And this happens again and again, where they say, hey, we've got a suite. We're going to put in a suite. Long term, don't worry about it. We switch. You know what I? Yeah,
like, and then a week later.
And I don't think that we're voting on a letter and maybe an intent. We're setting something here that's a variance that's pretty serious, and it goes with that property. And people can say their best wishes and whatever, but we have to be sort of careful about what happens down the line. But I don't know. It's not a clear thing for me either. So.
Okay, are we ready to vote?
Oh, I feel like I've been way too quiet at the end of the
day.
Okay, letting you guys have some fun. I actually have been enjoying the interplay. I actually used to live at 1333 Pine Road a million years ago. I know those laurels very well. They will grow back, but they could probably be trimmed a little bit further in just to give a little bit more space on the boulevard that would allow vehicles to be a little further off the road. I think that's probably something that would be good if this goes through. I see what Councillor Anderson's saying about precedent, and I get very concerned about precedent as well, because we have had that issue come before us when B&Bs don't want to have the parking requirements or don't want to be held to the parking requirements. And this is, I totally hear what you're saying, Rich. That is a nice quiet road, but it gets really packed on both sides. So I do think there's a parking issue that we need to look at. And I feel like we can maybe ask for that information or ask for something from staff subsequent to this particular variance. I feel like I'm sitting on a fence. because
Edge, perhaps.
I know it might be a laurel hedge. I have to say, personally, I'm not a huge laurel fan, and I dug a very big, mature one out of the front of my mom's house years ago. I have never worked so hard in my entire life. It was about 5 times the size of these ones. It was big and nasty. But these are what you do when you're a teenager, right? Doesn't mean I don't like laurels, just they're not my chosen shrub of choice. But I hate taking down greenery. I'm like all about protecting greenery, right? And whether I love them or not, laurels are green. And these people were caught in the middle of the bylaw changes, and that is problematic for me because I know there are parking requirements for B&Bs, but we changed them quite a bit with bylaw 1310. So anyway, welcome to my stream of consciousness.
Okay, I'm going to call the question now. All in favor? Any opposed? That carries. Thank you. Would we like to make a subsequent motion to examine the Pine Street situation? Would staff need that, or is that something that could just, like Mr. Gregg, is it something that can just be kind of put on your work plan, or would you like a motion?
Through the mayor. So this could affect planning, bylaw, engineering, and public works. I think it really is. If council wishes to have staff look at Pine Road, I'd suggest making a motion. It definitely has an implication. There's no room on the side of the desks. I can speak for other departments as well. I think and say that. So it may have budget implications or work plan implications. A little context. Yes, we have some informal parking that happens in many of our roads and neighborhoods. We have plans for where we would do things like extend pedestrian walkways. It's not both sides of every street in town. We do have a plan to look at some of the major streets. Pine Road is not one that is currently earmarked for having sidewalks. So it is less formal, but it's also one block in length and not a through street typically, but it's all just context. To get back to the question, certainly it could be looked at, as could other locations in town, so it's sort of a prioritization exercise. And to that end, a motion would definitely help, and it would be something I think the CAO would want to look at in all sort of the weight of other strategic priorities, just so that the expectation is clear with council.
I think Pine Road has become much busier because parents are dropping kids off at school and using that as kind of a detour. So for that reason, I would make a motion that staff come back to us with a report about Pine Road and all its issues. I don't know how you want me to word that.
I think you should do your best to narrow what those issues are. So if we're talking about parking, be explicit about talking about parking. If you're talking about parking on the sides of the roads, be explicit about that. If we're talking about traffic flows, we should also be explicit about that. So whatever you can do to provide context to this report that you're going to be receiving will be extremely helpful, because then the report can be more focused.
Could be the current state of parking on the boulevard and its implications on road safety.
Go with that then, Councillor Anderson.
So, how about, are we writing this out, or? Yeah.
So we're talking about road, parking on the road.
Yeah, so parking on the boulevard. So, to have district staff at some point look at the parking on Pine Road, on the boulevards, and its implication on road safety.
Well, are you done?
I think so. Well, I remember Mr. Kalsovich also had mentioned that there's the diagonal parking that was going out sort of with like the the butt end of the vehicles that were sticking out onto the street. So I'm just trying to incorporate that into this. I don't know if that makes. What do you think?
I was on a different tack, and I was going to say on a bit of a tangent. The proponent mentioned illegal suites being part of the problem. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if there are illegal suites. I don't know if that is the problem. But if it is, that's a problem to me. And I know bylaws overtaxed, but I would like to, if those are real issues, like if that's a big part of the problem, that there are visitors that are patronizing unlicensed B&Bs.
I think they're B&Bs.
Or
I think they're secondary suites.
Or illegal secondary suites. Like that to me, like this is where the chickens come home to roost for me for a lot of these unlicensed accommodations. It's stuff like this where people are living in a neighborhood and like that's the part of it that really resonates with me. And so I can't take your word for it that there's an illegal suite, but it doesn't sound unreasonable to me. And I just wanted to say that as far as complaints coming to district staff, coming to bylaw about that, I'd like to see them followed up on, because I think my impression, I know that district staff are overwhelmed. I don't want to say overwhelmed, but I know that there are a lot of issues coming before them. But I don't want this kind of stuff to just kind of get brushed under the rug and just be like, oh yeah, like whatever, they'll be gone tomorrow. So that's a point that really resonates with me. Like it's a totally different story if someone's saying, look, I'm doing it by the book. Here's my thing. Here are my laurels. It's not a great situation. We can debate it. But if meanwhile the guy next door is doing something that's totally against the rules, like that's a much bigger problem to me. And I think that might take a lot of the pressure off, or at least some of the pressure off, because I know 10 people signed the petition, but I know that there are other people that share your concerns too. And I don't want you and those people who might be watching or who would talk about it to think that these aren't concerns that matter to me anyway, and to the council. So
Mr. Rotenberg, do we have something?
Yeah, so I've drafted one resolution on parking and another related to suites. It's just dealing with the matters separately. I'll pop the first one in front of you and we can build it out together, or you can direct me to change it however you'd like.
It's good.
Is it Pine Street or Road?
Street.
On the agenda, it says road.
Pine Road.
Oh.
You live there.
I know. I don't know whether I live on
Say
March Road or
Pine,
Street.
on Pine.
Fine, everybody knows where that is.
It
Depends which map you look at, basically.
Can we
road.
add diagonal parking into that as well?
Are we implying just pedestrian safety or more like road safety? I mean, because the thing about diagonal parking and the big vehicles with their butts hanging out over the road is road safety as opposed to just pedestrian safety. I mean, it's not somewhere that we have a plan for a sidewalk, so.
Pedestrian and road safety. Okay.
Could that be any more vague? Oh, sorry. Was that my inside voice? Turn off the mic.
Does that give staff enough direction, Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, I think the intent is clear. The question I would have is if there's some help in, because I know our CAO who's not here would ask as well, some indication of how much of a priority this would be for council would be helpful. And is this issue, because I think this is an issue sort of come out, there's sort of a bigger context. Is it the motion is specific to Pine Road? Is that the intent? Let's look at this block and deal with this block, or is it other?
I think since it's only one block long, it could be a high priority. What does everyone think?
It seems like it's the worst of the parking problems, but I'm curious about, it feels like we have this problem that's growing all over town, and it needs to be looked at on a whole, whether that's, the signage of what's parking, whether it's permitted parking for locals, like what it is, so we can get a handle of it and make sure we know who's parking where. And if they're parking on the boulevard and they don't have parking on their property, that they need to get with zoning and get parking put on their property to alleviate the congestion. So figuring out where these cars are coming from should be part of it.
It is a bigger problem, but I think we can just look at Pine Road for the interim.
Can we add my street to it too?
We could add mine. We won't talk about how far into the road I have to walk every morning on my way to the co-op, but I know that there's a future sidewalk. So
Yes, Larch Road is being helped along a bit.
The case.
But I feel like, I hate to say that something gets pushed off the side of the desk for Pine Road, but it, as you say, it's a one block. It is particularly bad. It's definitely significantly busier since those speed bumps went in, because it's the quick duck around.
I guess
So-
potentially this is a case study. So
Mhm.
if we focus on this street and figure out what works, and if it works, then we can apply it elsewhere instead of trying to broad brush the whole town and just sort of prioritize it as if it's the case study for the rest of the town.
I think it's a good start, yes.
I don't feel like it's an emergency today, like in that sense. I think it's a long-term goal that we worked towards, but I feel like with the kids being out of school right now, it's, there is some time, like to be able to see what's going on there, because you actually won't even see the kids going to school and the people using that road to get in and out. And so, yeah, I don't think it's highest, it's code red or anything, but.
Of course, in the summer is when you might have a little more activity in some of those potentially illegal spots, but.
So now, next, or later?
Next.
Next.
So who would like to make this motion?
Sure. I will move that council direct staff to prioritize presenting a report to council on boulevard parking, including diagonal parking on Pine Road, and the impact on pedestrian and road safety.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Seconded.
Second.
Councillor Kennington. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
That was a fun little tangent.
That was ridiculous. That was so long.
Well, I think it's an important issue.
No, it
like,
is.
I think
It's
Probably want me to go back on vacation.
No, that's great. The next report is item 7.2, Development Variance Permit Application 1701 Rainforest Lane. After staff present, there will be is that the next one, really? It is. After staff present, there will be an opportunity for the applicant and then members of the public to address council on the proposed permit. Ms. Whitney Brown, welcome back.
Hello again, Mayor and Council. The matter before you is another variance permit application, this time at 1701 Rainforest Lane. You can see it there on the map for its location. The applicant is seeking several different variances for the construction of a single-family dwelling, an accessory residential dwelling unit, and that would be located above a proposed two-car garage. So by way of a brief history before I get into the particulars of the application, the District of Euclid Council adopted Bylaw 1310, as I mentioned, in the fall of 2022, amending most residential zones to allow an ADU, and also at that time added a number of regulations which property owners had to comply with in order to build an ADU. And at the time of adoption, council noted that there were perhaps few lots in Euclid which would easily accommodate all of those applicable regulations. And council noted that many property owners would perhaps need to seek a variance of some sort to make construction of an ADU feasible. So this is an example of that type of variance application. Next slide, please. So the applicant's lot is a large pie-shaped lot, as you can see here. The applicant's intended uses, as I mentioned, are to construct and live in the single-family dwelling located there at the north end. and to have a secondary suite, which is on the sort of east side of that single family dwelling, as well as an ADU located sort of at the toe of the property. So both long-term rental and residential uses on site. The side yard setback along the west side has already been cleared extensively by the neighboring property to accommodate their driveway. And so the applicants are seeking to locate the proposed structures as you see them to provide a larger buffer from that cleared setback. So to achieve their desired site plan, they're seeking setback variances to the front lot line from a required variance of 7.5 meters to 6.4 meters. The only portion of the single family dwelling which would fall within that setback is 2 posts to accommodate a covered entry to the secondary suite. The southwest corner of the ADU, as you can see in that map there, as well as access stairs, would also be located in the front yard setback, so 6.4 meters from the lot line. An additional point to note is that the applicant has agreed to a variance condition, which would be to maintain the vegetated nature of that front yard setback. So they, under the conditions in the permit before you, they'd have to retain it in a vegetated state without significant removal of the trees and vegetation. And any significant removal would require approval by the Director of Community Planning. The District of Ucluelet bylaw does not currently regulate vegetation retentions and setbacks in this zone. So this particular condition would actually provide a greater vegetation and streetscape guarantee than those offered on the surrounding properties, which are within those setbacks. Next slide, please. So the applicants are also seeking a couple of different variances to the ADU regulations, including allowing the second story to be 100% of the lower story and allowing a very minorly larger garage by 2.5 meters. Most notably, they're seeking a height variance from the permitted 3.75 meters to a maximum of 8 meters to allow a 2-story building to be constructed, locating the ADU above the garage, sort of a traditional carriage house idea. And their sort of intent is that clustering the development in this way would allow the applicant to meet their fairly extensive required parking in a smaller footprint. The next slide, sorry. So this is just the view there. That's the corner of the lot, and then coming around that front yard setback, as you can see, it's highly vegetated. The impact to the streetscape for 6.4 meters versus 7.5 meters would be expected to be fairly minimal with the height variance because it would be in line with the height requirements for single-family dwellings along that lot. And the side yard setback to the nearest neighbor is not impacted, not part of this variance. So as council has noted, housing, particularly rental housing, is an important kind of development in Ucluelet. Accessory residential dwelling units provide a form of infill development and rental housing that has increased privacy and function, so could be a fairly desirable type of development. And a proposal such as this, which adds rental and residential density in an existing and already serviced lot, could therefore be considered appropriate kind of infill development. So, as always, here to answer any questions that council might have about the application, and the applicant, I believe, is joining online, as well as any members of the public should always be given a chance to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Whitney Brown. Does council have any questions for staff? Oh, Councillor Hoare.
I have one. So you were talking about the vegetation being retained in the setbacks, and I'm looking at the plan diagram on page 97 of the agenda. So the coach house, that one entrance looks like it's going to actually impact quite heavily into that setback. So I'm just wondering about how the vegetation can be retained and still.
Through the mayor, are you referring to sort of the stairs in the corner closest to the front yard setback?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is
so one of the matters in the variance is they're required under the bylaw to have a pedestrian access path from the road
Right.
to the ADU. So we anticipate that that would be located through the setback. That's permitted. They're allowed pedestrian path access, but the sort of amount that is done would be part of their building permit application to be reviewed and approved by the Director of Community Planning.
Okay, I'm thinking, so that's not, I'm just, I don't speak planning. I'm just trying to tell whether that's like meant to be a pad with the stairs coming down to it, or is that just like measurement? I don't see this as, I really don't speak planning.
That's a dimension.
Yeah.
So that's right there. How far out is that coming? That's what you're saying, right?
Yeah, that
That's a
space right
dimension
there.
line now.
Where's the slice there?
Yeah.
Right. So you're worried that you're going to be removing.
I'm just
vegetation
worried
out
about how much vegetation gets removed in that setback, and if we're trying to preserve the vegetation.
That's just a dimension line. That's not a pad or anything.
Okay.
of- That's not. It only goes to those stairs, I think.
Yeah,
right?
that's
Is
right.
that
Well, that's, and then the pathway from it. So, okay.
Through the mayor, yeah, that's correct. That's the dimensioning line rather than a clearing variance request. It's just to show the dimensions of that spot. The extent of it would be, Bruce, if you could just move your clicker over a little bit just to show the edge of the stairs.
Other side.
Yeah,
That one,
so that's
yeah.
that's the extent
Bruce
that this
has it.
variance would allow.
This is why I need a translator for planning speak.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson.
I forget my question is I didn't realize that before what you were saying, where the height of the ADU, the variance for the height change on the ADU doesn't impact anyone with line of sight, and it's essentially the same height as a single family residence. Is that right?
Through the mayor, this particular zone has for principal residences has a height restriction of 9 meters. For the ADU, they're asking for a height restriction of 8 meters. So the idea, not that it would not be visible, it probably would be visible from the street, but that it's not out of line with existing structures on the street. If the applicant rearranged their entire site and decided to locate their single-family dwelling in that location, it would be the same height.
Right.
That's sort of what is meant by that comment.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking more in terms of like privacy. It doesn't look like they're going to be looking down in someone's window necessarily there because of the positioning on the lot where it's looking out into the road and the boulevard there.
Through the mayor, directly to the west, the property has a driveway just adjacent, so that's the closest point. And then, so there might be impacts that, of course, at a higher height, they will have a different visibility into the street, but they're not looking directly into someone's window, as I understand the site.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Kennington?
You see it. Currently with ADU, there's a height restriction that goes up incrementally as you move away from the 3 meter setback that they have to be back from, like the minimum setback. So how far back from the property line would this be to conform to ADU?
Through the mayor, I'll refrain from trying to do quick math in my head. It won't go well. But that particular restriction is not 3 meters from the lot line. It's from the setback line. So on a property such as Pine Road or an R1 property that have shorter setbacks, it's a minimum of 3 meters. In this case, they would get additional height for every meter that they went back from their setback. So they'd have to be quite far from the existing line, and the lot being in a regular shape, I don't actually know if there's somewhere on the property that they could locate it that would still be far enough from the single family dwelling to meet those requirements.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna try to do the math.
No, just making the point that it is possible to go higher in certain circumstances. So it's not to say that an ADU can't be 9 meters high or 8 meters high. It's just that where it's sited is related to its height. So.
Through the mayor, yeah, that's exactly right. There is a possibility of going above that 3.75 meters, just in proportion to the distance from it. But yeah, totally correct.
He does speak planning.
I asked the questions for you.
Councillor Mashti, anything?
I'd love to hear from the proponent.
They will have that opportunity.
Yeah, no, I don't have any immediate questions at this point. I have lots of thoughts, but I feel like I need more information before I can.
Any other council questions for staff? Okay, this is the opportunity for the applicant or their agent to speak. Would the applicant like to address council? Please click the raise your hand icon if you're attending on Zoom, or *9 if you're attending by phone.
All right, I believe the applicant has her hand raised. I'm going to allow you to talk now. All right, you have been unmuted on our end.
Sorry, it keeps muting me. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for having us. I thought I would just take an opportunity to introduce ourselves, because I know there's a lot of fear and stress when new people come into neighborhoods and they don't really know who they are and what their intentions are with beautiful tree lots like the one we have. I moved to Yuki in 2011, where I lived and worked there for a year, ultimately ending up in Tofino, where I own and run a small business. Sorry for my nerves. I have a real public speaking fear. I'll do my best here. So I've been living in Tofino for quite some time. I bought that lot in 2016, in January 2016. Took quite a long time to pay it off, and really looking forward to building my first home out here on the West Coast. So I've lived in the region for quite some time, and I'm really familiar with how much Yuki has changed over the years. Me personally, a little bit about who I am and my background. I have a diploma in environmental planning dating back into the late 90s, when people didn't really even consider environmental planning into development. Moved on to get a degree in environmental science and worked in environmental assessment for 5 years, where most of my career I spent time telling people to plant trees and preserve vegetation. My partner Anthony is a helicopter pilot, a professional mariner, and has worked on a lot of local restoration projects. So the environment, tree maintenance, and the keeping of vegetation is definitely really important to us. We're also pretty private people, so we honestly don't want to see the community on the street level as much as they don't want to see us. We were definitely interested in maintaining privacy. We definitely have always seen planting of trees, maintaining vegetation, and sort of like boosting what we have on the lot is like a real priority for us. So complying to that condition of preserving as much vegetation in the setback as possible is absolutely no problem for us, because it was always our intention to leave as much vegetation as we can. And yeah, so what it's worth, that's just who we are, because I know there is always a lot of worry and fear that people might just nuke lots and not take care. And I also, as a small business owner, struggle a lot this year with staff housing, so I'm acutely aware of how difficult it is to live and work and run a business in a town such as Ucluelet or Tofino. So I do see the value of having an accessory dwelling unit that ideally we use it for a short period of time for a family, because we're in our mid-40s and this will be our first home, because we've chosen to live out here and it's difficult. And then, yeah, looking at using it as a long-term rental into the future. I think that's what all I had to say. I just wanted to introduce ourselves, and if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions from council? Councillor Mafti?
Yeah, hi. Through the mayor. I'm just looking at the schematic here, and just walk me through this. It seems to me that if you wanted to, you could put both of these structures within the setbacks, and I'm wondering if you can just explain why you feel that the only way to build the two structures on the lot is to go over the setback line. Why can't you just bring them closer together?
Hi. Actually, because of the fact that you need to go 6 additional 0.6 meters of setback for every 0.3 you go up in height, and the irregular shape of the lot and how it narrows down towards the southern end, is that I think in order to make that happen, we pretty much have to put that ADU directly in front of our front door of the main residence. And I guess the main point was looking into the future and seeing that as that turns into a long-term housing unit, that creating a nice private space for everyone was in the best interest of that, for that location. Is that we sort of decided to sort of position it in a certain way, point the windows in a certain way. We originally had kind of wanted to encroach in that setback a bit more just to increase the privacy of whoever would be renting and living up there, but understand that that isn't acceptable when the greater public receives like a net loss of that extra meter. So yeah, that's the answer, is that I think even with the math, going up that height to accommodate a suite on top of a garage, there really isn't space to put it on the lot.
If you were to forget about the height, assume that the height wasn't an issue at this point, would you be able to put the structures such that they don't exceed laterally? Like I realize that the two posts, like we're talking about fairly small encroachments on the main residence, and if you leave the height out of it, could you bring them close enough together that this isn't an issue? Could you build within the setbacks if you only focus on the lateral side of it?
Yeah, I think my understanding is that if we just decided to do a garage without a dwelling unit on top, and we just had that garage out there, that we would just be able to do what we wanted, and we could leave it right there, and we could move it in right into that corner into the setback, and there'd be no stairs. So we would, you gain back that 1 meter we're looking for in that one corner, but it's my understanding that that garage could be located there without requesting a variance. And maybe Monica can correct me on that, but I'm understanding that's.
Okay, well, until we hear from her, thank you. You've answered my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions from council? Ms. Whitney Brown is just going to confirm or deny your statement.
Through the mayor, I'm just confirming what the setbacks are for accessory buildings in that zone. Bear with me for 1 second.
If it wasn't for the height, like there's no reason why they can't just bring it into the pocket. Like
That I can tell, there's no reason for it.
the height part of it, like I understand. To me, the height part of it seems pretty stupid because it's not going to be significantly higher than the house thing. But I can kind of understand people who are like, well, what the fuck, just pull it back.
I'm on the girl from Ipanema.
Sorry?
Play the girl from Ipanema.
You know, whenever we have a waiting thing, I remember a Glee show, right? I think first or the second Glee show where Courtney had one of the kids poke this thing through the curtains while they were changing sets, and it was like the wheel on your, and they would spin it and then spin it the other way and then spin it faster, and I was so in my head that's what happened every time.
I'm too ADD to watch TV. Yeah. I can't make it 5 minutes.
Okay, never come to a Glee show because that would make me crazy.
Oh, the show that plays here.
Yes,
I thought you
here.
meant the
Yeah.
TV.
Through the mayor, in this CD3 zone, the side yard setbacks are less for accessory buildings for lots of this size. The front yard setback is actually the same 7.5, so they would have to retain to meet the existing setbacks, they'd have to locate it closer in regardless. But that setback, vegetated or not, is 7.5.
Any other questions for staff while she's up there?
I have a quick one.
Councillor Anderson?
I'm just wondering, there's one of the concerned residents wrote a letter. It was on the late agenda, and I don't have my glasses, so I'm going to do my best here to read this. But I just want to get your 2 cents on this, where the person who wrote, I know from experience that if you build a house on a setback line, you will need to clear an additional 5 to 10 feet for footings, foundation, backfill, etc. If they get the variance and build on the front setback at 6.5 meters from the main house and 5.5 meters from the coach house, you can add on another 3 meters that will need to be cleared for excavation, footing, foundation. Say goodbye to the trees and their own privacy on the roadside of the property. Is that a legitimate statement, or?
Through the mayor, I can't really comment on what building requirements are. What I would note is that the permit before you, the condition with the vegetation retainment, relies on the Director of Community Planning to approve any plans. So a plan which nukes the frontage, I would say, is unlikely to pass our Director of Community Planning's approval. The current setback requirements along that road of 7.5 meters don't inherently have vegetation protection. I don't think that the applicant has any intention to do this, but if they could move their ADU to sit within their setbacks, and they could still remove all of the vegetation along that setback for ease of building, the condition in this report would limit how much vegetation they're able to remove from that front setback. That's the only condition that would do that. There is no existing condition with the setbacks that the district has in place to prevent vegetation removal.
Right. Maybe that'll placate the person who wrote the letter to some degree.
Even if they were pushed out of that setback, we could still put the condition that they retain the vegetation, because they're asking for a height variance, so that can be tied to that, not just the encroachment. Because you do need at least 3 feet, and the standard for scaffolding is 5 feet. So even if you were butt right up against the side of that building, you're still going to be clearing 5 feet. Even if you use ladder jacks, you're going to be 3 feet. So, there's no way of retaining that vegetation and construct this. Is to answer your question, Sean.
I'm gonna get the air crane. We're gonna build it.
How do you know so much?
I don't know.
That's why he's here.
You too.
Any other questions for staff?
I know the other thing here is the size of the ADU and the fact that they want to use 100% of the garage space for an ADU as opposed to what's allowed, which I've lost, whatever that percentage is. 65.
Yeah, and they
60.
want 100.
Yeah, and they want 100. And I'm like, I get having the garage, I get having the ADU, and I get wanting to maximize the ADU. I'm like, I don't know that I have a question. I think this is what happens when I read planning stuff.
I could add to that if you like.
Sure.
The 60% reduction, I guess, is for the massing. But when you start to look at the environment and the carbon footprint of building, it makes no sense to reduce the top floor, because you're adding exterior walls and you're increasing the carbon footprint for the foundation, for the amount of living space you're creating. So it actually makes sense to go bigger on the top floor than smaller when you talk about overall the environment. So in this case, for that build, to me, that's a non-issue, and depending on how you look at it. But it's more efficient to build 100% on top of 100%.
Yeah, and that was kind of what I was thinking that. Thank you for verbalizing. Some days I can't speak. You're totally translating for me today. Because, I've sat in this chair and made comments about density time and time again, and I can't at this point say, have an issue with doing something that mathematically, carbon footprint wise, makes sense. Yeah. So, and I don't really think, when I look at that height variance, it's not, yeah. I have to say, I don't really have an issue with that one either. So.
Any other questions from council before I go to the public?
I don't have a question, but would it be more appropriate to make a statement at this point, or after we, when it's time for discussion, after the motion has been made?
I'll probably wait till the public speaks. Okay, thank you, Ms. Whitney Brown. Are there any members of the public attending in person that would like to speak? Are there any members of the public that are attending on Zoom that would like to speak? Please click the raise your hand icon or press *9 if you're attending by phone.
We have a hand raised. Emily Mecki. I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. I'm going to allow you to talk now. You've been unmuted.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thanks. So I submitted a letter by email and in person. My property is on the north side at 716 Rainforest Drive, and I'm happy to hear from the applicant that they're not looking to remove the vegetation on the setback that borders our home. We've left the vegetation there as well because privacy is important to us. But there's no guarantees that they'll be the owners of the home forever. And same with many other properties in the neighborhood. And there's been a lot of trouble. I don't know if trouble is the right word, but there's been a lot of lots completely cleared recently to maximize space. And to some extent, and the applicant has experienced this themselves, where it feels unfair that you've left a setback or you have left vegetation and someone next to you has cleared the entire lot. And so in my letter, I requested that an additional condition similar to the condition on the street setback be added to the adjacent side yard setbacks. And I was just wondering if the council was going to consider that additional condition. Thanks.
Thank you, Emily. So the condition you're hoping to put on says no vegetation clearing or tree removal will be permitted within the front yard setback, except as required for minor landscaping and pedestrian paths and access. Prior to receiving a building permit, the permittee shall submit a plan indicating the limits of disturbance required within the front yard setback and receive approval by the Director of Community Planning. That's the one that you're hoping to include, is that correct?
That's the one that already exists, and I'm hoping to add one similar to that, but for the side yard setback. So in the email that I sent,
okay, so it's no vegetation clearing or tree removal will be permitted within the side yard setbacks, except as required for minor landscaping. Prior to receiving a building permit, the permittee shall submit a plan indicating the limits of disturbance required within the side yard setbacks, demonstrating that there is no significant reduction in the privacy of adjacent lots.
Yes, that's the one. Thank you.
I'll look to staff to see if that could be an additional part of the permit.
Through the mayor, councils can certainly amend or add conditions to the permit. I think it is on page 99 of the agenda, the drafted development variance permit, and it is condition 5 that it currently speaks to the front setback. I think council should probably turn its mind to, does the condition relate to the variance that's being granted? So if it shouldn't be arbitrary. In other words, like if it's the proposed location of the building, certainly it is encroaching within what would be the zoning standard front setback. If the condition sort of extending it to the side setbacks, if that is in council's mind related to that front yard setback variance, well then that would be an appropriate condition.
Councillor Kennington, I'm looking to you to interpret what Mr. Gregg just said.
He's saying we should only put conditions on the setbacks that are affected by the build, not arbitrarily like a side yard setback, because they're not going into that side yard setback.
Okay. So we should not add that because it doesn't pertain to.
That's right. So this carriage house encroaches on the front yard setback. So the give me on that is that they will hide it with existing vegetation.
Got it.
Is that right?
through the mayor, yes, if they were encroaching in the side yard setback, then that would be a different issue.
Nailed it.
A little context, if I may, when Rainforest was created and the zoning was put in place, but go back in time a few years. One of the amenities that was proposed by the developer at the time was creating green buffers around. I think the language in the reports was talking about a buffer around the lots. Unfortunately, that was done through a building scheme at the time during the subdivision, which the district is not a part of. A building scheme is something that developers do really for marketing purposes and don't have the same. It's not a regulatory tool that has teeth and from the district side. So within Rainforest, there's a bit of a patchwork of how things have developed. Some people have respected that building scheme and some haven't. Others haven't. It's not like a covenant that's on there that the district is party to that we review at building permit stage. So there's a bit of history there and a varied expectation, I think, in the neighborhood of what is protected. And I mean, it's a very characteristic, beautiful neighborhood. But it is, in terms of the regulatory role of the district and the setbacks, those are really building setbacks that we have in our zoning bylaw. And it's a bit of a crude tool compared to, I think, the expectation around maintaining and managing the vegetation, the trees, and the shrubbery.
Thank you for that history. That's great. Are there any other members attending via Zoom that wish to speak?
So the proponent has her hand raised at this point in time. Would you like me to unmute her?
Sure.
Okay, Aileen, I'm going to unmute you now.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to take an opportunity to address Emily's questions and fears about what may happen to the vegetation between our two lots. And I feel bad because I had always intended to drop a letter off just to let whoever lived in that home know that we really do intend to maintain that vegetation and probably plant extra vegetation. I can't stress enough how much we're keen to keep our own privacy, and we do see that lot as a really excellent example of maintaining a lot of vegetation and really blending the home into the community. So even without the extra condition, I can give my verbal guarantee that our intention is absolutely not to disturb vegetation along that side setback to the degree possible, and also at anything that is disturbed during the construction phase. In all aspects of our build, we're definitely keen to bolster that back up and do some planting. Like, I look at some of those seedlings when I first bought the lot back in 2016, and they were so tiny, and I always thought, like, oh, I should really get in here with a bundle of trees and get some in the ground, because by the time I can build, they might actually have some size. And I've always regretted not doing that. But it is definitely our intention to do what we can to really make our lot private, to have nobody see us and have us not see them. So that's our best intention right now, and hopefully the community can bear with us as we go through the construction process. If some of the vegetation gets disturbed, it will be like a priority for us as in landscaping and improving the vegetation on property after the period of construction. So just thank you, Emily. I'm so sorry I never dropped off that letter to introduce ourselves and make sure you weren't stressing too much about what's going to happen next door.
Thank you for that clarification. Are there any other hands raised, Mr. Rotenberg?
There are no other hands raised on Zoom at this time.
And have we received any unpublished correspondence on this matter to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
We have not received any correspondence other than that which has been published on the 3 late agendas and on the regular meeting agenda.
Thank you. Is there any further public input? There is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
I'll move that.
Okay.
I'll get this out on the floor. I would move that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue development variance permit DVP 23-06 for the construction of a single-family dwelling and accessory dwelling unit at 1701 Rainforest Lane.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. A seconder?
I'll second it.
Councillor Hoare. Further discussion? Councillor Mafty.
If I can chime in, looking at this, I started by focusing on the ADU. I think I was few people were more excited than I to see council embrace and sort of promote the construction of ADUs, and to see someone who has the means and the intent and the wherewithal to add one to the community that's great. I love it. And then there are a number of sort of like logistical issues that play into this for me. And reading through all the letters from the folks on Rainforest, some people talk about that scheme. That's neither here nor there because it has nothing to do with us. And so I think we can forget about that. The height variance, to me, it's almost like a little bit of a red herring, because if we look at the height restrictions for a house or whatever, like this isn't crazy. They're not building the CN Tower. And so I'd be okay with figuring out how we can make the height work and make a variance work on the height, and then the 100% floor area is something that I think Councillor Kennington already addressed. And so I think what they want to do makes a lot of sense to me. The part of it that I struggle with is what I'm getting from the proponent is like, privacy is so important to us that we really want to prioritize our own privacy to the point where we're gonna ask you guys to give us an exemption that all of our other neighbors that have already built on the street have had to follow. And unless there's a hardship, if there was like a massive glacial erratic boulder or a stream or like an eagle's nest or some compelling reason why they couldn't just compact the two units, I'd say, yeah, like let them have the height, let them have the square footage, just fit within the setbacks. That's what everyone else does, and it's a win-win. So I'd say I'd vote no on this, but I'd encourage the proponent to just pull it in a bit.
Thank you for your comments. Any further discussion?
I agree with Councillor Mafty on this. Looking at the site plan, it does look like it will all fit, and the separation between the carriage house and their house is massive. It's greater than between them and their neighbor. So they're prioritizing their own privacy over that of their neighbors in this case. So again, as Councillor Mafty mentioned, if there was a hardship that you couldn't fit this on, but as a site planner, this can fit on this property without any issues. So it's really difficult for me to find a compelling reason to approve it as presented, when it would be relatively easy to adhere. And again, as Councillor Mafty pointed out, there's not really an issue with the building form or the height. It's really just the building form, the height, the setbacks, all of those things combined. It's a big ask. But I do want to commend the proponent for going this route and providing an ADU. So I would like to see this happen, just with some minor tweaks. So not straight up rejecting the motion, but there's a middle motion, provide alternate direction. I'm wondering if that's something that we can look at.
Thank you. Yes, we can. We have to deal with this one first. Further discussion on my left? Councillor Hoare?
I don't disagree with what you're saying, Councillors Kennington and Mafty. There is room on this lot, and I think a little pullback, a little bit closer. I mean, don't get me wrong, I like my privacy too, but then again, I live in a townhouse, so I don't have a huge amount of it, because density. So yeah, I have less issue with the form of this than the placement of this, and it's a minor tweak, I think. So I'm not actually, I would support option 2 in this case, but we've already got option 1 on the table. So
any further discussion with the recommendation that's on the table? All in favor? Any opposed? And that's defeated. So there is an option B in our package.
Do this one too.
Oh, Councillor Anderson, sure.
You got this?
I got this. I would move that council defer consideration of this application until and the alternate direction would be to make a small adjustment to the site of the ADU. I'm making this on the fly right now. Joey told me never to do this.
Way to break the rules.
So you've decided on the application.
Sorry?
You defeated the motion, right?
Right.
Yes, we're on
So-
option B now.
Right, but the option starts with defer consideration of the matter, right?
That's what he said, yes.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll have to can something a little bit different here. Why don't I turn it over to the Director of Community Planning, and he can help you walk you through this process.
Through the mayor, if I could have 1 minute to just consult with Mr. Rotenberg, I think understanding the direction council wants to go to it, maybe that there is a motion that would take us there without further delay.
Great, thank you.
5-minute recess while they do that.
Sure. A motion for a 5-minute recess?
I will move that.
Councillor Hoare, Councillor Mafty, all in favor? Carried.
Plant some laurel. That's great for privacy.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. They just said we do DVP. So instead they just
Spoilers. Yeah, Gary seems to be.
Somebody's sitting at home chewing their fingernails.
Okay, we're ready.
Yeah, that'll get him. So that Bruce had Wayne goes away and we've modified 3 motions so far. What can we do before the end of the meeting?
All right, we'll reconvene this meeting at 6:16. So, Mr. Rotenberg, we were crafting a motion falling under option B.
Yes. So staff's understanding at this point is that there are 2 elements of the development variance permit that are an issue. Our understanding is that those elements are condition for or variance for sub A and for sub B. If council were to proceed and wanted to move forward with this variance as amended right now, to delete those 2 variances, our suggestion is to amend the variance as attached to the report, reconsider your motion to defeat the variance. What do we do from there? Amend the motion so reconsider the motion to defeat the variance. So now the motion to defeat the variance would be on the table, or the variance itself would be on the table. And then you would amend that motion to add the words as amended, because you had just amended it. You'd have to vote on that, and then you'd be back to your main motion, which would be to adopt the development variance, or to authorize the issuance of the development variance permit as amended for the construction of the single-family dwelling. The outcome here would be that you'd be authorizing the issuance of this development variance permit, but deleting 4.1 sub A and 4.1 sub B. Before we go down this route, I think it's really important that our Director of Planning reviews 4.1 sub A and 4.1 sub B to make sure this is in fact what y'all want to do. The process, so basically we'd go back in time, we'd remove the notion that the variance permit was defeated altogether. You'd amend the permit, so you'd amend the permit first, go back in time to remove the fact that it was defeated, amend your motion saying that you want to adopt an amended variance, and then adopt that motion. So we're looking at 3 votes.
Can't we just go to option B and amend the recommendation and vote on that?
So in this case, you've defeated the variance. So the recommendation there is that you would defer consideration of this variance to a later date to work out details, is my understanding of it. But you've actually, the variance was on the floor, and you've defeated it. So the question here is whether you want to go back and review this variance again, or if you would like it to be deferred. And maybe I'm not understanding properly, and maybe the Director of Community Planning can help.
Councillor Mafty?
Through the mayor, if I understand this correctly, though, aren't we then basically giving the proponent a take it or leave it situation? Wouldn't it make more sense to stick with the defeated motion and then just make it explicitly clear what we would approve and let the proponent come back to us and give them a chance? Maybe they have a totally different idea, rather than saying, like, if you want to build exactly this, it's a yes or no. And just be like, we're going to say no to this, but we would say yes to this, and give them that information.
And I think the crux of it here is notice, right? If you have a new application, then we now have a new DVP that's going to come back.
Right.
So, like council, my understanding is that council can amend these development variance permits. But if you have a new application for development variance permit, then we'd have to go about notice, and this would be, the process would have to carry forward as if you're dealing with development variance permit 23-010 or -09. But maybe the Director of Planning can help.
through the mayor, if what we were hearing in the discussion is that if council essentially are not okay with varying the setbacks, but don't have an issue with varying the height and the area of the ADU, what Mr. Rotenberg has come up with is not a motion, but a whole process that will get council there. That essentially it would say that there are 5 variances that are listed in that development variance permit. Take out the 2 about the setbacks and then pass the DVP with the other things varied. So then what the owner or applicant would have is, okay, as long as they move their building within the setbacks like everybody else in that zone, they're okay. They would have the height and whatnot to build the building that as they've shown. They just need to relocate it on site. That wouldn't come back to council. It wouldn't be re-notified because they'd be meeting the zoning setbacks. That's essentially the outcome of dialing it back in time to amend the permit before making the decision on the permit.
And if through the mayor, if we go through with that, and if that's passed, at that point the proponent can just start building.
They would apply for a building permit, and the building plans, we would be reviewing them against what was varied and what wasn't. So they would have to show an amended site plan to be within the setbacks, otherwise they wouldn't get a building permit.
Right.
But the height would be varied, so they could show the height as they've shown. And
so they wouldn't, like, there would be nothing that would force them to go back to the drawing. This cuts out the necessity of going through the entire process again. This basically says you can do it this way if this is what you want to do.
You've got your height and area variance, but they're left with fitting them within their setbacks.
All right. Spectacular.
Okay, let's do that. So the first thing we need to do is repeal our decision.
Awesome.
To defeat the motion, correct?
I think the best approach here, the cleanest approach here, is to start by amending the DVP as presented. I've got the resolutions right
Okay,
here. and I can
perfect.
Let's
pop
go.
those.
Yeah. Man, Joey could lead us like right.
This is where he works a new car into it.
Yeah, just read off the screen. I'll be clear, that is not my intention. And we think this is the best approach. And we just want to make sure that the variance that you guys are trying to adopt is in fact the deletion. So I think essential for everybody to reread variance 4A and 4B at this time, and to confirm that those in fact are the items that you'd like to change. And also for the Director of Planning to speak.
Through the mayor. Yes, they are on page 99 of the agenda. 4A is the variance there. That is to reduce the minimum front yard setback to 6.4 meters instead of 7.5 for the overhang supports in the principal dwelling. And 4B was reducing the front yard setback to 6.4 meters for the accessory residential dwelling unit. So those are the two those setback variances are what this would take off the table or take out of the permit.
Okay, who would like to make that motion?
I will move that council amend DVP 23-06 to delete variance 4A and 4B as presented in report number 23-06.
Thank you.
That's an error on my part. Apologies. I think that is not the right report number.
It's 23-106.
So good to go now.
Why don't you reread the motion?
I will. I will move that council amend DVP 23-06 to delete variance 4A and 4B as presented in report number 23-106.
Thank you, Councillor Kennington.
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed? That carries.
I'll take this one, sure.
This is the next motion. Who would like to make that?
I'll move that council reconsider the following motion. that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue Development Variance Permit DVP 23-06 for the construction of a single-family dwelling and accessory dwelling unit at 1701 Rainforest Lane.
I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Mafty. Councillor Kennington, any further discussion?
Let's do the time warp again.
We don't have to specify that as amended?
That's the next motion.
Okay. Okay, so all in favor? None opposed? That carries.
And I will move that council amend the motion to add the words as amended after the words Development Variance Permit DVP 23-06.
Second.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Councillor Kennington, further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. That's it, Mr. Rotenberg?
One more.
Now we have an amended motion on the table. We're back to the main motion. It's a matter of whether you would like to deal with the main motion as amended. And this is the text. This is that motion.
I will move that council authorize the Director of Community Planning to execute and issue Development Variance Permit DVP 23-06 as amended for the construction of a single-family dwelling and accessory dwelling unit at 1701 Rainforest Lane.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare.
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
It's not 106, is it? Is that?
No, that's the report.
Is Aline still with us? Did she follow all of that?
Aline is still with us. She does have her hand raised at this point. I wouldn't recommend additional input at this point as the matter's dealt with, but it's entirely up to Your Honor.
Aileen, you probably have your hand up because you want to know what just happened.
I think that's reasonable.
I'll refer you to staff to get that all figured out tomorrow, if that's okay. The next report item is 7.3, Temporary Use Permit, Lot 12, Blackrock Oceanfront Resort. After staff present this report, there will be an opportunity for the applicant to speak. Who's giving this report? Oh, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. Through the mayor. I'll give an overview of the application, but I just want to start by saying it is sometimes unfortunate to be recommending rejection of an application. And I just also wanted to share that I had a call from the applicant, Mr. Earhart, today, and I really appreciated that he was calling to say that we disagree with your recommendation, but really to give me the heads up that so that I wasn't feeling thrown under the bus, that they were starting up the bus, and that's okay. That council is aware that staff make a recommendation, but really the decision is in council's hands. That said, I'm going to just give a brief overview, and then yes, the applicant, I believe, would like to address council, and we'll see if there are any questions. I'll just share my screen here. Okay, so this is lot 12. So lot 12 is, I'll just turn on my pointer here as well. Okay, so this is lot 12, as it's referred to. So Blackrock Resort in this aerial photo is over to the right. The staff accommodation building is up closer to Marine Drive here. So the next. Why is my slide not advancing? Here we go. So Marine Drive at the top of the screen. The green line is the Wild Pacific Trail. That was as captured by GPS some years ago. So it actually, you'll note that it follows in the old stairwell, which no longer exists. So the routing is really following the yellow dashed line now, is what's there today. Browns Beach parking lot and trailhead would be over to the upper left corner there. And the proposal is, within this context, this is a temporary use permit. And I should note that a temporary use permit in some ways mirrors a development permit. The way our bylaws read, that if you're going for a temporary use permit, you don't also have to do a development permit, because it's really a lot of the same considerations of what's the impact of the land use. So because the zoning of the property does not allow a parking lot, the proposal is to build a parking lot. It would need a temporary use permit. The application has had a few different forms. What the current application is to create a gravel surface parking lot on lot 12, particularly for the staging for a major renovation that BlackRock is planning, and for staff parking as well, to essentially free up space on their property. I mentioned the temporary use permit. So this is roughly the location on the site and the context. And within the application, as the report notes, that there is a QEP report, and a civil engineer has looked at the runoff control. So this the plan would remove a number of trees in the property. This line that's sort of hard to see, it's a dashed line, is showing where they would be picking up the runoff in a swale. And the recommendation is definitely to get it to non-erodible soil or rocky soils on the shore. So that would mean a pipe underneath the Wild Pacific Trail. And the QP has some recommendations, and they believe, although it's shown as a straight line on the engineer plans, they would follow the existing sort of contours as much as possible and minimize the impact on the roots of the trees. But there would be some construction in order to move stormwater off of the site. I wanted to highlight that there is a late item of correspondence. Item 9.2 on the agenda on page 223 also refers to staff accommodation building. Recently, we had confirmation, as this report was being written, that the application really at this point was focusing on the temporary staging parking necessary for the renovation. Where also there's a letter that speaks about staff accommodation, because there's been some different iterations of the application. So this was a previous site plan that we received that was for some RV parking and staging, and included at one point a more permanent staff accommodation building. And this, I believe, this corresponds with what was shown as that late item. They may have some further sort of future plans for the site, but at this point, really the temporary use permit would be around this staging and parking. The application, as I mentioned, staff are not recommending support for this. It really is a conflict of essentially a permanent disturbance of the site for a temporary use. That creating a parking lot in a forested site is not temporary in its impacts, and really the implication for while the business definitely needs to do a renovation and have parking and deal with their issues, for just the feasibility of construction, that really on what we're commenting on is on the public impact of that, including on the environment, on the public roads, and on the trail. That doesn't seem to align with what the bylaws and the direction of the district has been. That said, council can consider other aspects of the application, and so the alternative that is recommended, that if notice is to be given for consideration of the temporary use permit, we have given some thought to what conditions may minimize some of the impact, and so those are in the alternatives. I'll just pause there and see if there are any questions for staff, and I know the applicant would like to address council as well.
Questions for staff? Doesn't look like there are any questions, so this would be the opportunity for the applicant to present.
Good evening now, it is. I'm David Earhart, and pleasure to meet with you, Mayor and Council and staff. It's kind of an interesting situation that I'm here before you. I live in Burnaby, but as some of you know, my heart sort of started here in Ucluelet at 596 Marine Drive in 2004. So my background on BlackRock is 19 years in total that I've been involved in that project. that carried out the development, brought it to the point that it is today, and am, with my partner Amar Baines, are actively involved in the day-to-day of that project. It was with somewhat disappointment when I opened up the staff report and saw the position that has been taken by staff in respect to this matter. And while there are some technical issues that I will address a little later on, what I wanted to just mention to you is the following, is that very often when we turn on 60 Minutes or we turn on a program, a television program, and sit down and we listen to it, very often the commentator says, you know, there's a story behind the story. And that's why I'm here and going to be speaking to this situation. I'm going to be assisted to some degree by our management team with Adele and Lara, and they have a few points that they would like to raise. But I do want to just address a couple of things with you. The reason that we're here with this application is not because we have a choice. We do not have a choice. And the reason we do not have a choice is this, is that like every other business that's here on the West Coast, we have endured, suffered, and worked through the past 3 years or better, just trying to survive and trying to find a way that we can keep our business going, keep our employees employed, ensure that the livability of this community is maintained. And when we got through COVID, one of the things that we discovered was that the change in access to housing, the change in the access to employees, which was directly linked to the inability to supply them housing, the costs of our wages, all of those sorts of things had basically taken our business. And I'm not suggesting that it was only our business. I think this was represented all throughout the community. Our business model was no longer working. We were in a situation where we could not grow our business any larger because when we talked to our reservation department, we said to them, how many house cleaners do we have available in June? And that told us how many reservations we could take. It wasn't whether we had 133 rooms. It was, did we have house cleaners to be able to clean 70 of those rooms? So the entire business model that we had changed. So we sat down and we said, what do we do about that? How do we survive in this times? Anecdotally, a couple of weeks ago, us and every other business here on the West Coast took a hit. You know, at BlackRock, we had and lost $800,000 of business in that closure. That's $800,000 that did not go to the co-op, to Petro-Canada, to the Whale's Tail, et cetera, to be shared in the community. Those are the things that we're having to deal with. We had to sit down and rethink our entire business plan. And when we sat down and looked at our business plan, we realized that we could no longer survive as an economic force in this community unless we could do something about changing our revenue stream. How did we change our revenue stream? We couldn't bring in more people because we didn't have more guests, because we didn't have the staff to support them. We had to increase our room rates. How did we increase our room rates? The only way we were going to do that is to take a 12-year-old property that had not had a remodeling, and we had to redo it. We had to rebuild it. So we began a program about a year ago, working towards how do we reconstruct, how do we refurbish the hotel. We have now got a $10 million renovation program that is slated to start in the month, late in the month of September. The problem that we have is that in order to carry out that renovation program, we have some fundamental issues. how do we logistically support the renovation program? How do we find parking? How do we put up the contractors? How do we do all of those sorts of things when we have the inability to place that equipment, the inability to those storage containers, and inability to put the employees that were going to be doing the contracting onto our existing site? Last night at 9:20, I took a walk through our parking lot, and we had 4 parking spots empty at 20 after 9 last night in our entire facility. Now, if we had 3 C-cans, storage tent, contractors, et cetera, we would be hooped. So that was the point in time, beginning last year, where we had looked at what were the alternatives. And the alternatives were, with Lot 12, that we would be able to provide space for our staging area and for our staff in order to support the renovation. Our renovation program is going to be lasting from September of 2023 until June of 2025. We cannot construct in the months of August and July simply because it's just too tight. We just, even with the extra parking that we were hoping to get on Lot 12, we still couldn't fit everything in. So we have a situation where we have a desperate need. A desperate need in order to be able to maintain the operations and to be able to look after our economic plan for moving forward. Now, in the 19 years that I've been involved in BlackRock, I've appeared before council on 2 occasions. One was at the original zoning of the changes of the property back in 2006, and then at once in 2012 when I appeared before council asking for assistance on signage. In that time, we have never come back that I'm aware of as a principal of BlackRock Management, which are the operators of the hotel. We have never come to this council or to the city and never asked for anything special. Not because we're one of the 2 largest employees. We haven't done that. We have been a good community citizens. We have contributed. We've done what we could for this community, and I think Adele and Laura can speak to that. But we're now in a situation where we have a need that is the story behind the story. I'm just going to make a slight change to this, and I'm going to just pass on a little bit of information. The photocopier took advantage of me in that I asked for 6 copies of the documents that I'm about to hand out. And in the case of one of the documents, 2 of the pages are missing. So if you'll forgive me if I give them to council and rather than you. I'm going to just refer really quickly to these 3 pages. In just a moment.
Thanks.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The page that you see there is a page which is a tree survey showing the site. One of the concerns that I have with the report that's come from staff is that it's absolutely technically correct in respect to a few items. However, it does not give the total perspective. It talks about the fact that we're going to be impacting the Wild Pacific Trail because of the changes that we're making to the site. But if you look at that first page, what you'll see is there are 7 yellow dots on it, and those represent 7 significant trees. But if you take a look at that plan, you will see that in actual fact, there are 87 trees on the site. So what is being raised is that we're coming in and making big changes to the site. In actual fact, we're taking out 7 trees out of 87. Another point that ties into that from that plan that you'll see is that the site is 3.44 acres in size. That's roughly 150,000 square feet. The parking area that we're talking about disturbing and clearing out is a total area of 9,000 square feet, which is approximately 6% of the site, if you'll allow me to round off the numbers. So it's not like we're coming in and making significant changes to the entire site. Furthermore, if you were to take a look at the plan that is there showing the, I believe it's the second page, it shows the reference of the parking area in reference to the trail. At no point does the trail existing come any closer than 55 feet from the parking area, and that ranges from 55 feet to 85 feet away from the trail. So it's not like there has been a case of that we've come in and put in, or suggesting putting in parking immediately adjacent to the trail. Third point I'd like to just mention is that there's a concern about the frontage on Marine Drive. In actual fact, if you look at the layout, what you'll see is that there's a setback of 33 feet of undisturbed, unimpacted foliage and all the existing trees, with the exception of a driveway that would come in that would be roughly 6 meters in width. There are a few other points that we'd like to raise to you, but if I can just reference to the report that was done. The initial recommendations were that we would be, that it would not be issued. The other suggestion was that we would look for alternative location for carrying out our staging area and whatnot. For anyone that's involved in the construction industry, the ability to have a staging area off-site when we're moving back and forth with pallets, with all of the kitchen cabinets, all of those sorts of things from some other location as opposed to immediately on the site is a logical nightmare. It just can't work for us, and we aren't in the ability to work with that. There's some alternatives that have been suggested, an A, B, and C, that I should just comment on. Obviously, we have a problem with alternative A, which is an outright rejection. We also have problems with the suggested alternative B, because there's a couple of the things in the suggested motions that could be added to it are not necessarily possible for us to provide. In particular, the fourth item, which was dealing with a statutory right-of-way through the existing hotel location. The reason for that, and the staff is well aware, we do not have the ability to deliver that because it's a strata hotel. And in order to do that, it is requirement that the owners of the strata hotel would have to provide that statutory right-of-way. So it's not something that we can force onto those owners. And there is 133 different strata lots in the complex. So that's a very complex thing. So for us to be able to make a commitment to do that in order to put the parking lot is outside of our control. I would like to, at this point, maybe ask Adele if she would be able to provide some comment, because one of the things in the alternatives with the options was on the rejecting. Maybe let her just speak to it.
Adele Larkin, Mayor and Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to talk about the comment that was raised in the response back from staffing that there's no financial implication to rejecting this application. We employ 138 team members, all who contribute to the community by supporting other businesses, which in turn support the larger community economy. Additionally, with the rising costs of operating labor at the largest contributor, will cause us to increase our nightly rates, and we cannot do this without actually improving the offering to the community or to the guests. We need to make Black Rock better, in order to be able to increase our revenue stream, in order to be able to support the team with what they need in order to survive in this community. It's an expensive place to live. And we don't want to jeopardize anyone's experience of living here and enjoying what's here. We want to be able to provide the best for our employees, and we can't do that with the way the property is existing. We need to not only maintain the value for our ownership, the 133 strata lot owners, but we also need to maintain a value for the guest who's coming here, because they're paying a certain rate with a certain expectation. If we can't keep watching this property decline, because we can't do a renovation, because it's not convenient for us to do that renovation. So we definitely need to improve those two situations for both the real estate investment side of it, but also for the guests who are coming here on a nightly basis. By not allowing the top, it impacts us financially, and potentially putting 138 people out of work. We look at it and we're like, okay, well, we can't afford to keep operating the way we're operating. We don't have the money to keep operating we're operating. And I know David mentioned there's only 4 empty parking spots. We're only at 86%. So it's not like we're running red line at BlackRock. We're not. So even as it is right now, we only have the staffing to run in the 80s. We don't have the staffing to run at 100% as we are right now. So we can't continue to function the way we are. We will be in a continual declining state. Just a reminder to everybody, because we are a stratified property, it means that we share the revenue stream with those who've chosen to invest in the property, which means from an operating standpoint, there's not a lot of money that goes around. So it's not like we're sitting here as this big property going, woohoo, we got making bank all over the place. That is not the case. We are scraping by. We need to do this renovation. We definitely need to have the space in order to make it happen. The option is not to shut down the property, to use our existing parking lot, just to put it into how we're operating through it. We're actually going to be doing only 8 rooms at a time, which means we're actually going to run our business at the same time. We, again, have 138 staff members who are counting on us to keep our place in business, to keep them employed. Shutting it down so that we can get a renovation completed is not an option. Not for anybody. It's not an option for the community. I want Lara to come up and she's going to share some of the things that we do with the community here, and we make it possible because we're able to operate. If we can't operate, we won't be able to continue to do those things.
Hi, my name is Lara Kemps, 596 Marine Drive. I just wanted to share a little bit about our community and how we work with the community. Over the last 3 years, even through COVID and through this lovely road closures and so forth, we've donated over $40,000 back to the community. We've, and I'll share this little donation and sponsorship thing with you, that what we've donated. It's a little bit of a plea, really, because, you know, we scratch your back, you scratch ours, kind of thing.
Thank you. Here's my duffel bag.
Yeah, that's right, duffel bag. But during that time, during COVID and through the road closures, we did a lot of thinking, and our team is really, really important to us, and we kept every single one of them working. And it's pretty emotional, really, because we fed them every day, we sat around the table and put bread together. They're part of our family. So in order to do this renovation, we have to do this renovation to raise the rates, to be able to give our team members more money. Like, wages have gone up like a lot. So I just wanted to share that. It seems like a very simple report to me. It just seems it's been blown out of proportion a little bit. But I hope we could have you guys' support. Thank you.
Thank you, Delvar. The ask that we're putting before council this evening is this, is that there would be the ability for this temporary use permit process to move forward. We are quite happy to work with staff to put in place whatever requirements are necessary to look after environmental issues, geotechnical issues, all of those sorts of things that result in a good product, a good finished product. One of the things that sometimes is forgotten when a proposal like this comes forward is we have an investment between ourselves and the Stratolot owners of about $77 million in that property. So it's definitely not in our best interest to come in and do something slipshod or to do something second rate. That's just not the reality. When we do something, we need to do it right because the community owes it, we owe it to our owners, and we owe it to our employees to do it right. So we have no issue at all in working with staff to put in place whatever safeguards are necessary in order to allow this to proceed. Whether from an engineering, environmental, or any of those sorts of things. So if that's the requirement from council in order to allow this to move forward, we're happy to work with staff on that basis. The only comment that I would make is that we started this process back in November, and we are now at the 18th of July. And I know that everyone has busy schedules and lots of workload, but there will be shipping containers coming from Spain with countertops in the first week of October. That's a reality that we're having to deal with. So I leave that with you. It's not something that can be put off or dealt with next fall or next spring. This is a reality that we have today. Thank you for your time, for hearing me out, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there should be any. Don't let her get going.
David knows me well. One more thing that's actually really important to say is Lot 12, even though what we're asking for is that parking lot, it's financially not feasible right now, but what our goal is to do, with David talking about housing, is to build more housing. So, I mean,
that's one of the plans.
so that's, I just want you to make sure that you see that that is one of the plans, and that's what our proposal is for, eventually, so.
Yeah, and to be fair, sorry, I sort of screwed up. I should have raised that with you. That third sheet.
Can you speak at the mic, please?
That third sheet that we handed was actually a drawing that was done back in 2022 when we first started talking with staff about the creation of another staff housing building. And if you look at that, you'll see that the parking layout for that coincides with the location of the parking layout that we're looking at doing now. So it wasn't a case of that, hey, we suddenly said, let's just plop it, a staging area here. It was actually pre-thought out. If we put this here, we can still build the staff housing to the side of it. So it's not like we haven't sort of tried to think our way through this. Yes, that will only use half of the site, but we would like to hope that in the days to come there will be additional opportunities for expansion.
Thank you. And I believe you're looking at 2 years down the road for staff housing. Is that correct? Yeah. Does council have any questions for staff to begin with? Any questions for the applicant?
It was just answered, the 2-year timeline for getting started.
I have one quickly. Under option B, there were 4 conditions. You spoke to the 4th one, that's not possible for the statutory right-of-way. Would the other 3 be possible?
The arborist, that's not a problem. The landscape plan and security deposit, that's not a problem. And the third one for the stabilizing the drainage work, none of those are technical issues where that's part of doing business. So none of that is issue. The last one is the one that's out of our control.
That's what you stated, yes, thank you. For those watching at home, the applicant has said that option 1, 2, and 3 are doable. It's just the 4th one for the statutory right-of-way that's not doable. Other questions for the applicant?
When would the clearing start for the lot?
About 12 hours after we pick up whatever permits Mr. Gray
We're waiting.
will make available.
If you don't mind answering from the mic, I'm really sorry. People at home won't be able to hear you otherwise.
We literally have on standby trades that are as recent as today. We were walking the site, hoping that there'll be a positive outcome. But at the moment any permits are released, we will move ahead with that work.
Okay. Thank you.
There is a staff recommendation, but there is also option B. Would anyone like to make a motion?
Would it be possible to make the motion for B without that fourth? Like a way to
Yes.
word it so we can do that?
Yes. Councillor Anderson?
Just one quick, just going through the QEP, I went through and I just noticed that there was one recommendation. It was on page 6, and it was a recommendation from the QEP saying that site clearing is scheduled for the fall or winter of 2022. So I guess that's long gone, but it says, but they were suggesting that there's an interaction with nesting birds and roosting bats that was not anticipated, but if any clearing is required during the nesting period of March 26th to August 7th, a pre-clearing survey might be required. I don't know if that's a...
Yes, it just seems that we're so very close to that August date.
We're pretty much there, yeah.
That by the, just if council in his wisdom decides to allow us to move forward, I suspect it will take us till then, just internally.
Mr. Gregg?
Through the mayor, yes, we're aware of that nesting period. If council were to move this forward and direct us to give notice, we would have to get it out the door this week so that it could return on council's next agenda, which is August 8th, which is just outside of that nesting period that the QEP identified. So that's sort of the timeline I think that they'd be looking at.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Would someone like to move option B?
I would. I just want to be clear on, do I make that motion, just omit that fourth
Yes.
item?
Yes.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
correct.
I will move that council direct staff to give notice of its intent to issue TUP 22-12 subject to the applicant providing a detailed arborist assessment of trees 325, 326, 331, 370, 371, and 375 to 378 with recommendations for their preservation. Also, a detailed landscape plan and security deposit for the preservation and, if necessary, restoration of the trees understory along Marine Drive frontage. And a security deposit in the amount of $10,000 for the restoration and stabilization of the proposed drainage works. And there's a...
So just vote on that motion.
Yes. Thank you. So Councillor Kennington moved it. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson, any further discussion? All in favor? And that, any opposed? And that carries.
And I will also move that council direct staff to refer the application to the Wild Pacific Trail Society for comment.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare, any further discussion? All in favor? And that carries. Thank you for coming out. Okay. Now for some fun stuff. 7.4, Contract Authorization, Village Green Playground. This report will be presented by the Director of Parks and Recreation. Welcome, Ms. Fortune.
Oh, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yeah, I get the fun stuff today. Before you have a recommendation that Council authorize Mayor and the Corporate Officer to execute a $290,000 plus GST contract between the District of Ucluelet and Kinsale Timber Systems, known as Kinsale, for the Village Green Playground project. Just a reminder that this project is fully funded through Resort Municipality Initiative funds and is a part of the 2022 to 2025 Resort Development Strategy as approved by Council. Just a reminder on that. So staff published this project, as you can see before you, big open space, on BC Bid to engage an experienced play space design company for the design and installation of a new playground at the Village Green, which we would love to see. We had we were able to receive 8 proposals, which was great. All were fabulous. And staff evaluated these proposals. One of the things we did look at is how the community and public engagement session went as well. And so that process was also taken into consideration. So we looked at the tower play structure with slides, swings, climbing balance, natural play structures was very important, and of course, the uniqueness, or as Bruce says, the Yuki grid. So, Bruce, can you give us a slide? So this is the overall look at what we're looking at. Next one. And that gives you the view from the grass. So as you look out, the parking lot's to your right and the ocean is to your left. And this would be the shipwreck parkour section of the program. Next one, Bruce, please. This is towards where the swing set is now. This would be the new swing set, and we'll have 2 swing sets. One for little kids and one for older kids. Big kids. And that's the pathway that people are bicycling on right there. And the next one, please. And that kind of gives you a look at, we're protecting all the trees that we've got currently there, so those trees will stay and give a nice shaded area as well as some structure to the landscape as well. And Bruce, I think the last one. And that's kind of a side view, as it were. So this is what we're looking at. Any questions?
Questions for staff? No questions. All right. How soon would they get started?
I knew that question was coming up. So it would take a little bit of a process because they hand make everything that they do, because they're very specific to the landscape area of what they're doing at. So we're looking probably end of February for a start and completion prior to March 31st. So we should have something up and ready. So my goal is to get it going for Whale Festival for next year. So hopefully mid-March. That's what I'm pushing for.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
There is a staff recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
I'm happy to do this one. I will move that council authorize the mayor and corporate officer to execute a $290,000 plus GST contract between the District of Ucluelet and Kinsale Timber Systems Limited, Kinsale Play, for the Village Green Playground project.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
Thank you very much.
Can't wait to climb the crow's nest.
Me first.
I can beat you there.
True enough.
7.5 is our next item, Notice of Land Disposition, Strawberry Isle Marine Research Society. This report will also be presented by Ms. Fortune.
Thank you. This is, before you have a recommendation for a public notice of property disposition for a portion of land that sits currently behind our public works yard, and it's 334 Forbes Road. This is similar to what we did with the daycare, so this is a process that we do have to do. So in April of this year, Strawberry Island Marine Research Society reached out to council. They're looking at putting in a 20 by 8 foot storage container, primarily for the marine mammal response equipment. The district has as you well know, has limited property space, and staff determined that this would be the best location in terms of what we have availability to offer. We would be looking at a $10 annually for a term up to 5 years. Any questions?
Questions for staff? No.
I'm gonna ask a quick one. It is a locked space, so the access to it'll be off Forbes Road, right?
That's
That right of way. Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, as per the diagram there.
Great. There is a staff recommendation.
Fine. I will move that council authorize staff to issue a public notice of property disposition for a portion of the lands having the PID 025926691 and legal description Lot 12, Plan VIP 76147, District Lot 284, Clyquet Land District, and more commonly referred to as 334 Forbes Road, by way of lease for a term of 5 years with an annual fee of $10 plus GST.
I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
Thank you very much.
You.
Thank you.
The next item is 7.6, 2022 Annual Report. Staff will present, then members of the public will have an opportunity to ask questions and comment on the annual report. Mr. Rotenberg, the floor is yours.
Annually, the district's required to put together an annual report. The community charter dictates what needs to be included in the report. I'd love to start by thanking all the managers and directors for their contributions this year. Each individual, and obviously the CAO and mayor for their contributions as well. Each department has a section which outlines the budgeted projects for the previous year, where they're at, if they're being carried forward, and the projects for the upcoming years, and then gives a brief description of what each department does. Obviously, our department is not so fun, so our description is kind of bland. The report also includes our audited financial statements. And as the mayor noted, it is the community charter does require that council make an opportunity for members of the public to ask questions about the annual report and to provide comment about the annual report. At this point, we have not received any comment, but verbal comment should be allowed.
Thank you. Does council have any questions for Mr. Rotenberg?
In that picture of council and the mayor, I look quite short. Photo. Like Tim Conway short. Like
Is that a question?
Next time, wear your lifts.
I think that content is always evolving along with the pictures. I think in future years it'll be really neat to see how we can integrate council's strategic plan into this annual report and create reporting mechanisms associated with that.
That's a great idea. So there have been no written questions, but now would be the opportunity for members of the public to ask questions. Are there any members of the public that are attending in person that would like to speak? Josh, it's up to you. Nope. Are there any members of the public that are attending via Zoom that would like to speak? Please click the raise your hand icon or press *9 if you're attending by phone.
I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Have we received any unpublished correspondence on this matter to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
No, we have not.
Is there any further public input? Seeing none, there is a recommendation. Would council like to make a motion?
Sure. I recommend the council adopt the District of Ucluelet 2022 annual report as attached.
Thank you, Councillor Anderson. A seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Hoare. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The final report is 7.7, 2022 Statement of Financial Information Report. This report will be presented by the Manager of Finance. Or Sam, Mr. Perront.
Thanks for having me, Mayor and Council. Available on page 187 of your handout, you'll see the statement of financial information that we have to give to the province every year because it's required by the Financial Act. It's basically, we just have to wait till our audited financials are in, and we insert them in a certain series of ways. And then we extrapolate a couple extra reports that are in there that myself and my senior accountant, Levy Rivera, take care of. And it's all put in. So there we go. It's essentially the audited financials with some extra reports for your information. That is all.
Thank you. Any questions for staff? There is a recommendation. Thank you, Mr. Perront.
I'll move that council approve the District of Ucluelet 2022 Statement of Financial Information as attached to the July 18th, 2023 staff report number 23-100.
And I'll second that.
Thank you, Councillor Mafty and Councillor Anderson. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Is there any notice of motion? No. Seeing none, there are 4 correspondence items. I would like to bring item 9.3, proclamation request, National Drowning Prevention Week, forward for discussion. Before we deal with this proclamation request, I'd like to note that we frequently receive proclamation and other recognition and awareness requests, but don't have a policy for actually dealing with them. Is there interest in having staff develop a policy from council?
I feel like we can take them as they come, but maybe that's just my naivete.
I think Mr. Rotenberg is looking for some direction here, and there is a staff recommendation that council direct staff to develop a recognition, awareness, and proclamation policy for council's consideration. So I'll make that motion for him. If I can have a seconder.
I will second that because I know that we often get these, and it would be nice to actually have a little bit of how do we do this.
Exactly. Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Now moving to the Life Saving Society's request. There is a resolution that they have crafted for us. Which is on page 229. If someone would like to make that motion. It's wordy.
Part of the issue is that we're already past the date.
That's September, no?
Yeah, I thought it was September.
July 16th to 22nd.
No, that's the drowning.
Oh, that's the drowning, sorry. Am I on the, that's on 229. What page are we?
Although I don't have the motion in the digital agenda.
Yeah, Mr. Rotenberg, can you clarify for us?
Yeah, so my understanding is that there are, so on page 229, this is their pre-canned motion, which we received in early July. And what they're looking for is a proclamation that this week, July 16th to the 22nd, 2023, is National Drowning Prevention Week in the District of Ucluelet, and the do commend its thoughtful recognition to all citizens for our district. So, given the timing, it's not ideal, but we don't have a council meeting in early July, so we just wanted to make sure that this was in front of you as they're looking for a council motion. Council does not have to opine to every one of these requests. Proclamations are useful. They're kind of an old tool, especially in the day and age of social media. It may be very useful in this circumstance to have direction to staff to maybe share some of the National Drowning Prevention Week awareness communications on our social media, and that may achieve some of the outcomes that this group may be trying to achieve. You know, I can't speak for them, but
That would probably be more successful than us making this proclamation.
I think our social media probably has greater reach than our YouTube channel.
I think so too. Okay, let's just do that.
That being said, I'd like to bring 9.4 forward.
Okay.
And I would like to see if staff can light up our signs in blue. And I say that as someone who lost 2 grandfathers to prostate cancer and whose brother had surgery for it at 48. Prostate cancer is a big one in my family. And so any way that you can bring that information forward, again, some social media would be great. In September, yeah, I'm all about the blue. You might be too, Councillor Anderson, just saying.
I've spent a long time researching prostate cancer, and that's right. I think that's a great idea. Can we light up that front area there when we come into the junction?
Or sign at the junction. I think that's what we normally do. Yeah.
And then social media would be great. Yeah.
And that's for the whole of September for prostate cancer awareness month.
Yeah, and then also they have a contact just so that you're sort of tied into some of their social media as well, just to tag in.
Do you need a motion for that, Mr. Rotenberg?
I think because we're lighting up the sign, it'd be appropriate for a motion in this case.
Councillor Hoare?
I will move that staff light up the Ucluelet sign in blue for Prostate Cancer Awareness Month in September and broadcast it across our social media.
A seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Anderson seconds. Further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Okay, there are 7 information items, including 2 information items provided by staff. So shall we go through them one by one? We have 10.1, the release of in-camera resolutions from June 8th and 27th. The June 8th one was releasing the names of our accessibility committee. And that was to appoint Margaret Morrison and Todd Smith for a 2-year term, Scott Murray and Mary Ruff for a 3-year term, and councillor member Ian Kennington until the end of the council term to the Ucluelet Accessibility Committee. And the June 27th in-camera meeting was for the Barclay Community Forest Corporation to appoint Jeff Lyons to serve for a 3-year term as board representative of the District of Ucluelet on the Barclay Community Forest Corporation Board of Directors, and that Jeff Lyons, Julian Ling, and Dario Corlazzoli are the District of Euclid's designated representatives on the Barclay Community Forest Corporation Board of Directors for the 2023 to 2024 term. So that was the in-camera motions released. 10.2 is resolution tracking. Does anyone have any questions for staff about the resolution tracker? And 10.3 is 2024 convention. This is to do with UBCM. Oh, no, it's to do with AVICC. So it's going to be in Victoria next year from April 12th to April 14th at the Victoria Conference Centre. Also in that report, UBC has some webinars, and one of them is on Fire Smart Community Funding and Supports. So hopefully our fire chief is on top of that one. That's taking place July 26th.
Mayor, we'll just need a resolution to extend the meeting past 3.5 hours.
Okay, I will make a motion to extend our meeting past 3.5 hours. Could I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Mafty, all in favor? And that carries. Does anyone have anything else they'd like to pull out for information items? It's great to see the CBT is preparing another vital signs report for this year. The last one they did was 2018. Mr. Rotenberg?
So AVICC's already released their block of hotel rooms.
Oh.
Which seems really early to me, but that's okay. Hotel booking can be very competitive. If council provides direction now regarding the number of council members that they expect to be going to that meeting, we can block off the rooms. Victoria's nice. There's lots of hotel options, but it's kind of nice to be walking distance from the convention as well.
Absolutely. Is everyone looking to attend AVICC in Victoria, April 12th to April 14th?
It was really
Yes.
useful, that last one, so I would love to.
Yeah.
I would like to as well.
That I'd be interested.
You missed the last one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you would really enjoy it. So I would say all 5 of us are going to go, Mr. Rotenberg. And the closest we can get to the convention center, the better.
You have the socks. Pet friendly.
Yeah. Don't worry, buddy.
So because we're spending money, it'd be great to have a resolution at this point.
Okay. I will move that Mayor and Council, all 5 of us, attend the AVICC conference in Victoria, April 12th to April 14th in 2024, and registration and accommodation be arranged for us by staff.
I'll second that.
Councillor Hoare seconds. Any further discussion? All in favor? And that carries. Okay. Mayor's announcements. Staff put out a community notice today about our water update. Thank you for doing that. And it's just good to get some information out so that people are aware that they should be sort of retaining, like not, well, to practice mindful water usage is the way it was put. And the fact that we're okay for right now, but that could change. It's just nice to get some information out so that, because Tofino's in stage 3 right now. So yeah, I'm just really happy to see that. Thank you. And on Saturday, June 17th, the Howayet held their election. So I just wanted to congratulate Chief Councillor John Jack, as well as the councillors that were elected: Edward Johnson, Brad Johnson, Stephen Rayner, Stella Peters, and Evan Cook. And if council is all right, I would like to send a letter of congratulations from the mayor, if that's all right. Excellent. And council committee meetings. Councillor Anderson.
Nothing to report at this time. I've been sort of out of the country for that last little stretch, so.
So no slideshow from Spain?
I'll put something together for you for next time.
Just no subs.
Councillor Hoare?
Jealous right here, just saying. All right, let me see. Report to council. On July 1st, I attended the Canada Day celebrations. Kudos to the rec department for all their hard work. And my tall guy for helping me tie some things really high. And to Councillor Mafty for speaking. Well done. I also attended Mary Komodo's belated birthday celebration on the 1st, which was wonderful, and probably ate my body weight in octopus salad. Probably shouldn't have said that, but whatever. Also attended the Wild Pacific Trail Society meeting on July 5th, and Josh, the education guy, had some really interesting stats due to the road closures, like how few people were turning up for their walks, which normally in June are quite well attended. Not as well as high summer, but they're still, usually they have a good turnout. They have had some local people turning out, which is great. But yeah, just they're very active calendar. There's pretty much something going on every day. And the Westerly has a QR code on the front page, so check that out. What else? Yuki Days coming up on the 28th, 29th, and 30th. If you haven't stuck your volunteer hat on, then see Miss Fortune at the back of the room, because they need volunteers, and that Yuki Days doesn't run without them. And you can be like me. You can be just like, okay, tell me what I'm doing and tell me when, and turn up with your snazzy t-shirt. There's always a snazzy t-shirt. Anyway, so attend it, volunteer for it, have some fun with it. The other thing that I want to say is just on the subject of we're not hurting for water yet, but conscious use of it is important. That includes trees on your property. The cedars are showing serious flagging and signs of drought stress all over town. And if you've got trees on your property, put a trickle hose on them for a day. Like give some of your plants a little bit of help. I know people that are actually watering trees along our streets because the district peeps don't have the time to do it. So don't forget the green things.
Thank you, Councillor Hoare. Councillor Kennington.
On the 13th, I attended the inaugural meeting of the Accessibility Committee and met the fellow members, and we got right to it. So I'm pretty excited. There's a lot of work to do, but everybody's really engaged and enthusiastic, and I think we all just want to get started right away, but we'll do it next time. We set up the framework and then the meeting schedules, and it's quite full, but yeah.
Great. Thank you for taking that one on. Councillor Mafty.
I too attended the Canada Day celebrations. Delightful, fantastic. I had a tremendous time, and after that, I've been on a bit of a holiday with the kids, so not much else post Canada Day from me.
You were at the grad ceremony, were you not?
Yes, that's true. That was delightful. I guess I was there representing council as well. That was actually awesome. I really enjoyed it, and it was really nice to see all these kids that I see around town and their finery, and yeah, it took me back. It's an exciting moment, I think.
Did you stay for quite a while?
I didn't stay till the end. I stayed until I think there were 2 speeches left, and then I had to go because I asked someone to watch my kids, and I had to go get them. But yeah, I was there for about an hour and a half, and it was really nice.
And did you give out the district bursary?
I did, yes, to a fine, upstanding young man who was most grateful.
Nice. That's awesome. Thanks for doing that.
Oh, it was my pleasure.
Because I couldn't be there.
Yeah, the outfits were stunning. Let the record state.
Excellent. Okay, for me, I attended June 28th, the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District had a committee of the whole meeting in the morning and a board meeting in the afternoon. Attended both of those by Zoom. The only thing that really might intrigue West Coasters is that the Board of Directors awarded both the Alberni Valley and the West Coast Landfill Waste Composition Audit Services contract to Tetra Tech Canada, Inc. in the amount of $55,000. So if you've ever wanted to know what our landfill is composed of, you'll have to watch for that report. June 29th, I attended the Barclay Community Forest Corporation's 6th annual AGM here at the UCC. They have, I think I've said this before, they have put out a map, and I gave a whole bunch of copies to the front desk at the community center here, as well as the front desk at the district office. So if anybody wants one, they're there for you. And I just wanted to share a little bit about what went on at the AGM. The most exciting part was that the Board of Directors passed a motion approving a dividend of $1 million to each shareholder partner, subject to final approval of the auditor's report. And this will bring the total dividend payout to $10,550,000 since 2018. The board notes that this will likely be the last dividend issued until at least 2026. Because they have utilized all their available harvest volume for the period 2020 to 2024. The next harvesting program will not be scheduled until 2025. But I'd like to work with Samantha to do a little celebration kind of about this next dividend that we're getting, a little press release or something for the Westerly News. They employed 14 full-time equivalent jobs as a result of the logging of our timber in the last year. They planted over 139,000 trees in the past year, which brings the total number of trees they've planted to 412,000. And new trails have been laid out in the community forest and referred to Toquat and Ucluelethat First Nations prior to seeking approval for construction from the Ministry of Forests. And after approval, they will work with the Ucluelet Mountain Bike Association to find funding and create a management and maintenance plan out there for mountain biking. So that was pretty exciting news. July 12th, I attended the at the West Coast Landfill. There was a ribbon cutting for the Sort and Go to celebrate the organics diversion section, and then they gave us a tour of the landfill, which I always find fascinating, actually. And there is no smell. It always amazes me how well they do out there to mitigate the smell. There were a lot of bald eagles, though, I have to tell you. Yeah.
That's them with the composition.
And I am attending a Teams meeting that was called by Mayor Shari Minions from Port Alberni tomorrow from 1 until 2 to discuss the establishment of a permanent secondary access road in relation to the Cameron Lake Bluffs fire and associated highway foreclosure. And so this involves all the West Coast leaders of First Nations communities, as well as Tofino, Ucluelet, and the Alberni-Clayoquot Regional District. So that will be a really interesting meeting tomorrow afternoon. That's it for me. Any questions?
One more thing to add, if I could.
Sure.
So the night before we left about a month ago, and I don't know how much I'm allowed to say about this, and this is just from a citizen point of view, but the fire truck was coming up Helen at about 10 o'clock at night. And I don't know the whole story, but I know that like someone was in respiratory distress. Essentially, they hadn't been breathing for a while, and the ambulance came. The first was the fire truck, and I think we know all these fellas. Like Johnny Clayton, I think, was the last person to give CPR and bring this person back, and they lived.
Wow.
And I don't know. I think that deserves a lot of recognition. I need to find out the whole story, and I don't know everything yet. But yeah, I think that was to see all hands on deck with the ambulance and with the fire department there, and people running back and forth. RCMP as well. Officer Yannick was there, and it was just, I don't know, for them to be able to pull that off was pretty monumental. And I think the person was airlifted eventually to Victoria and is apparently doing okay.
Wow, that is a great story. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about matters within council's jurisdiction. Representations about matters that have been the subject of a public hearing are not permitted at this time. Are there any questions from the audience? Are there any questions by Zoom or telephone, Mr. Rotenberg?
Please click the raise your hand icon if you'd like to ask a question of council within their jurisdiction. There are no hands raised at this time.
And have we received any questions via email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
We have not received any emails at this time.
Great. Then I call this meeting adjourned at 7:42.